The doctor gave me 2 months to live, a grand total of 60 days before my lungs finally gave out. I didn't tell a soul. I just bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta to see my only daughter Nia one last time. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to tell her I was proud of her. But when I walked into that hospital room, I didn't find a daughter waiting to say goodbye to her dying father. I found my little girl in intensive care, her face beaten so badly I almost didn't recognize my own flesh and blood. Her husband, the man who swore to protect her, stood there in a $3,000 suit smelling of expensive cologne and lies. He told me it was a robbery. He told me she was just unlucky. He thought I was just a senile old man from the past who would cry and go home. He didn't know that before I was a retiree, I was a combat engineer. I spent 30 years finding things that were hidden underground and destroying them. I looked at his smiling face and I didn't feel grief. I felt the cold, hard click of a safety being switched off. I made one phone call. 1 hour later, his entire world was burning. Before I tell you how I took down the most powerful man in the city without throwing a single punch, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And tell me in the comments, what is the one line you would never cross when it comes to family? I read every single one of your stories. The paper in the inside pocket of my old leather jacket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Stage 4 lung cancer. Inoperable. The oncologist at the VA hospital had used a lot of big words, but the look in his eyes said everything. He looked at me with pity. I hate pity. I took the diagnosis, folded it neatly, and walked out. I didn't have time to die. Not yet. I had to see Nia. Since my wife Ruth passed 5 years ago, Nia was the only tether keeping me on this earth. We talked every Sunday, but lately her voice had sounded thin, strained. She told me she was just tired from work, that her husband Chase was building his tech empire, and she had to support him. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe my little girl was living the American dream I never had. I took a cab straight from the airport to the address Nia had texted me a week ago, but when I got to the big gated community, no one answered the buzzer. I called her phone. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. A cold feeling started in my gut, the same feeling I used to get in the field right before a tripwire snapped. I called the local precinct. They told me there had been an incident. They told me to go to St. Mary's Hospital. The walk down the sterile white corridor felt longer than any patrol I had ever done. The smell of antiseptic and floor wax made my lungs ache. I found room 304. I stopped at the door. I needed a second to compose myself. I touched the paper in my pocket again, reminding myself that I was the one who was sick. I was the one who was weak. I put on a brave face, pushed the door open, and my heart stopped beating. Nia was hooked up to more machines than I could count. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. Her left eye was swollen shut, a dark purple bruise blossoming across her cheekbone like a cancer. Her lip was split. Her arm was in a cast. This wasn't just an injury. This was a demolition. I dropped my duffel bag. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. I rushed to her side, my hands trembling as I hovered over her, afraid to touch her, afraid I might break what little was left. "Oh God, Nia, my baby," I whispered. She was sedated, drifting in that gray space between pain and nothingness. I looked at her hands. Her fingernails were broken. She had fought back. Whatever happened, my girl had fought. The door behind me opened. I turned around, wiping the moisture from my eyes, expecting a doctor. Instead, I saw him. Chase Caldwell. He looked like he had just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. His navy blue suit was tailored to perfection, hugging his shoulders in a way that screamed money. His hair was gelled back, not a single strand out of place. And the smell. He didn't smell like a hospital. He didn't smell like grief. He smelled of sandalwood and musk, a cologne that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. "Dad," Chase said. He sounded surprised, but not relieved. "You are here early." I looked at him. I looked for the red eyes of a husband who had been crying. I looked for the wrinkled shirt of a man who had slept in a hospital chair. I saw nothing. He looked fresh. He looked annoyed that I was interrupting his schedule. "What happened?" My voice came out like grinding gravel. Chase sighed, walking over to the window and adjusting the blinds, avoiding my gaze. "It is terrible, Silas. Just terrible. A home invasion. We were asleep. They broke in through the back patio. 2 of them. I tried to reach for my gun, but they were too fast. They wanted the safe. Naya, you know how stubborn she is. She tried to scream. She tried to fight them. He turned to me, spreading his hands in a gesture of helpless defeat. I told her to just give them what they wanted. I told her not to be a hero, but she wouldn't listen. One of them hit her with the butt of a pistol. I stared at him. I have built bridges, and I have blown them up. I know about structure. I know that when a story has a weak foundation, it collapses. Where were you? I asked. I was held at gunpoint in the hallway, Silas. There was nothing I could do. Do you think I wanted this to happen? I am a victim here too. He pointed to a small, almost invisible scratch on his forehead. A Band-Aid covered it. It looked like a paper cut. You have a scratch, I said, pointing at my daughter's broken body. She looks like she went 10 rounds with a prize fighter, and you have a scratch. Chase's jaw tightened. The charming smile faltered for a second, revealing something sharp and ugly underneath. I am lucky to be alive, Silas, and frankly I don't appreciate your tone. I have been dealing with the police, the insurance, and the press all morning. My company is launching a new app next week. Do you know what this kind of bad publicity does to my stock prices? He checked his gold watch. Look, I have to step out. The board of directors is calling. They are panicking. I need to calm them down. You can stay here with her, right? Just don't touch anything. The doctor said she needs absolute rest. He walked past me, patting my shoulder. His hand felt cold. I am sorry you had to see this, Dad, but she will be fine. We have the best doctors money can buy. He didn't wait for my answer. He walked out the door, pulling his phone from his pocket before he was even fully in the hallway. I heard him say, totally changing his tone to an upbeat professional voice, "Hey guys, yes, tragic situation, but let's pivot to the marketing strategy. Sympathy is good for the brand." I stood there, my fists clenched at my sides. My lungs burned, but it wasn't the cancer. It was rage. Pure, molten rage. I turned back to Nia. I pulled the plastic chair close to her bed and sat down. I took her uninjured hand in mine. It was cold. "I am here, baby girl," I whispered. "Daddy is here." I sat there for 20 minutes listening to the machines, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. I needed to know the truth. Chase's story had more holes in it than a target range. Burglars don't usually beat a woman half to death while leaving the husband with a scratch, and they definitely don't leave the husband looking like he is ready for a board meeting. A nurse walked in to check the IV drip. She was an older woman, heavy-set with kind eyes that looked tired. She adjusted the tubes, her movements gentle maternal. She looked at me, then at the door where Chase had exited, then back at me. "Are you the father?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I am Silas." She hesitated. She looked at the digital chart on the monitor, then lowered her voice to a whisper, leaning in closer to me. "Mr. Mercer, I have been an ER nurse for 30 years. I have seen car accidents, bar fights, and home invasions." She paused, glancing at the door again to make sure we were alone. "The police report says robbery. That is what Mr. Caldwell told the officers, and that is what the officers wrote down. But I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. But robberies are usually chaotic, Mr. Mercer. These injuries, they are personal, and they aren't all new." The room seemed to tilt. The nurse pulled the sheet down slightly, revealing Nia's shoulder. There were yellow and green marks fading on her skin, old bruises, weeks old. We found evidence of previous fractures in her ribs that healed poorly, hairline fractures in her wrist. "Your daughter didn't just get hurt last night, sir. She has been getting hurt for a long time." I felt the air leave the room. The cancer diagnosis in my pocket felt insignificant compared to the weight of this revelation. My daughter had been living in a war zone, and I had been gardening in Florida, oblivious. "Why didn't the police say anything?" I asked, my voice trembling. The nurse gave me a sad, knowing look. She straightened the sheets and checked the monitor one last time. "Mr. Caldwell is a very generous donor to the Policeman's Benevolent Fund. The sheriff and he play golf every Sunday at the country club. In this town, money doesn't just talk, Mr. Mercer. It writes the police reports." She squeezed my shoulder. "If I were you, I wouldn't trust the official story, and I wouldn't leave her alone with him." She walked out, leaving me in the silence. I looked at the fading bruises on my daughter's shoulder. I thought about Chase's $3,000 suit. I thought about his fake concern. I thought about the robbery. It wasn't a robbery. It was an execution that failed. I reached into my pocket and took out the paper that said I had 2 months to live. I crumpled it up in my fist. 2 months was a lifetime. It was more than enough time. Chase thought he was untouchable. He thought he had the police, the money, and the power. He thought I was just a dying old man. He was right about the dying part, but he was wrong about everything else. I pulled out my old flip phone. I didn't use smartphones. I didn't trust the cloud. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. It rang once. "Yo, Silas, is that you?" The voice on the other end was young, fast, and surprised. It was Dante, the kid I had pulled out of juvenile detention a decade ago and taught how to use a computer for something other than stealing credit cards. "Dante," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I need you to find something for me. Anything. Pop. What you need? I need to know everything about Chase Caldwell, not the Wikipedia version. I want the dirt. I want his bank accounts, his emails, his deleted files. I want to know what he had for breakfast and who he is sleeping with." There was a pause on the line, then the sound of typing. Fast. Rhythmic. "Caldwell. The tech guy. That's a big fish, Silas. Heavy security. What did he do?" "He hurt Nia." The typing stopped instantly. The silence on the line was heavy. When Dante spoke again, his voice had lost all its playfulness. "I am in. Give me an hour." I hung up the phone. I looked at Nia one last time. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Sleep now, baby girl," I whispered. "When you wake up, the monsters will be gone." I stood up. My knees didn't creak this time. My back was straight. I buttoned my leather jacket. I wasn't Silas the retiree anymore. I was Sergeant Mercer, Combat Engineers, 1st Division. And I had one last bridge to blow up. I walked out of the hospital and the humid Atlanta air hit me like a wet towel, but it felt cold compared to the ice in my veins. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address to my daughter's house in Buckhead. The driver, a young man with a heavy island accent, looked at me in the rearview mirror and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I lied. I have spent my life dealing with explosives. I was a combat engineer in the Army for 25 years. My job was simple yet terrifying. I had to walk into fields where death was buried under 6 inches of dirt and find it before it found me. You learn to look at the ground differently. You learn that a patch of grass that is slightly too green or a pile of rocks that looks a little too organized can kill you. You learn that the smallest detail is usually the most important one. When the cab pulled up to the house, my engineer eyes were already scanning the perimeter. It was a sprawling modern mansion, all glass and sharp angles, sitting on a hill like a monument to money. Chase liked to show off. He liked things that looked expensive. But I wasn't looking at the architecture. I was looking at the entry points. Chase had told the police the intruders broke in through the back patio. I walked up the driveway, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't go to the front door immediately. I walked around the side, stepping through the perfectly manicured azalea bushes. I found the side gate. It was locked. Not just locked, but secured with a magnetic electronic latch. I looked at the ground. No footprints in the mulch, no broken branches. I made my way to the back patio. The sliding glass doors were massive floor to ceiling. If someone had forced them open, the locking mechanism would be bent or the aluminum frame would show stress marks. I pressed my face against the glass. The latch was pristine. There were no scratches, no signs of a crowbar, no shattered glass. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm. In my line of work, we call this a clean site. Too clean. A robbery is violent. It is chaotic. People panic. They smash things. They kick doors. But this house hadn't been touched. The only violence that had happened here was focused entirely on my daughter's body. The house itself was treated with respect. That told me everything I needed to know. The monster didn't break in. The monster had a key. I was about to turn back to the front door when I heard it. Music. Not the somber music of a grieving household, but upbeat, smooth jazz. Then the smell hit me. Roasted pork, charcoal, expensive cigars, and laughter. The kind of cocktail party laughter that sounds like breaking glass. I followed the sound around the corner of the house to the lower terrace, and I stopped dead in my tracks. I expected a crime scene. A crime. What I found was a social event. There were about 50 people gathered around the infinity pool, men in polo shirts and loafers, women in sundresses holding flutes of champagne. A catering team was moving through the crowd with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. In the center of it all, standing by a massive stainless steel grill, was Chase. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking like the picture of casual elegance. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and a pair of tongs in the other, laughing at something a tall blonde woman was whispering in his ear. My daughter was hooked up to a ventilator 5 miles away, fighting for every single breath, and her husband was hosting a barbecue. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost doubled over. The rage I had felt in the hospital room transformed into something colder, sharper. I stepped out from behind the hedges. A few people near the edge of the patio saw me first. Their conversation died instantly. They looked at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered onto a golf course. I was wearing my old leather jacket, faded jeans, and work boots. I didn't fit in this world of polished surfaces and fake smiles. The silence spread like a ripple in the water until it reached Chase. He turned around, his smile freezing in place for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. He set his drink down and walked toward me, arms open, performing for his audience. "Silas?" He boomed, his voice projecting so everyone could hear. "I didn't think you would make it. I thought you would be resting at the hotel." He stopped just outside of arm's reach. He was smart enough not to hug me this time. He turned to the crowd, gesturing at me like I was a prop in his play. "Everyone, this is Silas Nia's father. He flew all the way here on a moment's notice." The crowd murmured polite greetings. I saw pity in some eyes, but mostly I saw curiosity. They were looking at the spectacle. Chase lowered his voice, stepping closer, bringing that cloud of expensive cologne with him. "I told you not to come here, Silas. This is a private gathering, a fundraiser. We are raising money for Nia's recovery and to start a neighborhood watch program. We are trying to turn this tragedy into something positive, a fundraiser." I looked past him at the open bar at the waiter serving filet mignon on skewers. "This party cost more than my annual pension." "You are raising money?" I asked, my voice cutting through the jazz music. "You are a multi-millionaire, Chase. You have $5 million in the bank. Why do you need their money to heal my daughter?" The people nearby shifted uncomfortably. Chase's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip unnecessarily tight. Silas," he said, shaking his head with a condescending chuckle. "You don't understand how these things work. It is about community. It is about solidarity. But I know you are overwhelmed. You are from a different generation. You are a simple man. You don't get how we do things in the modern world." He turned back to his guests, raising his voice again. "Please forgive my father-in-law. He is old school, a veteran. He has seen hard times, and sometimes he gets a little confused, a little aggressive. The stress, you know. He doesn't mean any harm. He was doing it right in front of my face, painting me as the angry, senile, potentially dangerous black man. He was discrediting me before I could even open my mouth. If I shouted now, if I shoved him, I would just be proving him right. I would be the violent intruder in his peaceful sanctuary." I looked at the faces in the crowd. They were nodding sympathetically at Chase. They believed him. He was one of them. I was the outsider. I took a deep breath. I pushed his hand off my shoulder. I didn't shove him. I just removed his hand like it was a piece of dirt. "I am going inside to get my things," I said quietly. Chase stepped aside, a smirk playing on his lips. "Of course. The guest room is at the end of the hall. Try not to disturb the catering staff, Silas. They are very busy." I walked past him through the parting crowd. I could feel their eyes on my back. I heard Chase say something behind me, followed by a ripple of laughter. He was mocking me. He was celebrating his victory. I entered the house through the sliding glass doors. The air conditioning was freezing. The noise of the party faded as the heavy glass slid shut behind me. I stood in the living room. It was white. Everything was white. White sofas, white rugs, white walls. It looked like a museum, not a home. I looked for pictures of Nia. There were none. There were only abstract paintings and a few photos of Chase shaking hands with politicians. I started walking toward the guest room, but my eyes kept moving. I wasn't just looking at the furniture. I was looking for the wires. I was looking for the pulse of the house. Chase was a tech mogul. His company built security systems. He was obsessed with control. Nia had told me once that he monitored the temperature of the wine cellar from his phone. If he monitored the wine, he monitored everything else. I stopped in the hallway. I looked up at the corner of the ceiling. There, blended perfectly into the crown molding, was a tiny black dome. A camera. I walked 10 feet further, another one hidden inside a smoke detector. I looked at the smart thermostat on the wall. It had a motion sensor. I realized then that this house wasn't a home. It was a panopticon, a prison where the warden could see every corner. Chase was arrogant. Narcissists always are. They think they are smarter than everyone else. He thought he could stage a robbery, beat his wife, and host a party on the same ground because he controlled the narrative. But he had made a fatal mistake. He was so obsessed with watching others that he forgot his own machines were watching him. If these cameras were active, and I knew they were, because the little red LEDs were blinking rhythmically, then they didn't just see me walking down the hall. They saw everything that happened last night. They saw who entered the house. They saw that no one broke in. They saw who threw the first punch. I didn't go to the guest room. I went to the kitchen. I grabbed a glass of water, pretending to be the tired old man he claimed I was. But as I drank, I was memorizing the layout. I counted 6 cameras on the first floor alone. The data had to go somewhere. A cloud server, maybe. But guys like Chase, guys who have secrets, they don't trust the cloud completely. They want physical backups. They want a hard drive they can touch. I finished the water and set the glass down on the marble counter. Through the window, I could see Chase making a toast. He looked like a king. "Enjoy your party," I whispered to the empty room. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Because you just invited the demolition crew into your house." I picked up my bag and walked toward the front door. I didn't need to scream at him. I didn't need to punch him. Not yet. I had found the pressure plate. Now I just needed to find the detonator. I needed Dante, and I needed to get into the basement. I sat by Nia's bed for 3 hours listening to the rhythmic hissing of the ventilator. It is a sound that drives you mad if you let it. It is the sound of a machine breathing for your child because she is too broken to do it herself. Around midnight, the night nurse came in. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Mercer," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "we have a problem with the billing." I tried to process the admission paperwork for the extended ICU stay, but the insurance card on file has been flagged. It has been suspended by the primary policyholder. I stood up slowly. My joints popped. "Suspended?" I asked. "That policy covers everything. Nia has had that insurance for 5 years. The nurse looked like she wanted to cry. "I know, sir, but Mr. Caldwell called the provider an hour ago. He placed a hold on the account pending a review of coverage. He claimed that the injuries might be self-inflicted or the result of negligence. Until the investigation is complete, the hospital cannot bill the insurance. We need a credit card on file or," she trailed off, "or we have to transfer her to the county hospital." The county hospital, the place where people go to die in hallways because there aren't enough beds. Chase wasn't just cutting her off. He was moving her to a place where the care would be slower, where mistakes happened. He was trying to finish the job without getting his hands dirty. I told the nurse to give me a moment. I walked out into the hallway, and there he was. He had changed out of his party clothes. Now he was wearing a cashmere sweater and jeans, looking like a concerned husband pacing the floor. But he wasn't pacing. He was checking his stock portfolio on his phone. When he saw me, he didn't hide the screen. He just smiled a small, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There is a misunderstanding with the insurance, Chase," I said, keeping my voice low. "You need to fix it, now." Chase sighed and slipped his phone into his pocket. He walked over to the vending machine and stared at the reflection of his own perfect face in the glass. "It is not a misunderstanding, Silas. It is a financial decision. The doctors say the swelling in her brain is severe. Even if she wakes up, she might not be Nia anymore. She might be a vegetable." "Do you really want to drag this out? Do you want to bankrupt the family for a hopeless cause?" I stepped closer to him. I could smell the mint from the gum he was chewing. "You are worth $50 million, Chase. This isn't about money." He turned to face me. His eyes were dead, like shark eyes. "It is always about money, Silas. You are just too poor to understand that, and frankly, you are becoming a nuisance. I tried to be nice. I tried to invite you to the fundraiser, but you had to make a scene. You had to embarrass me in front of my investors." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He lowered his voice to a whisper so the nurses at the station couldn't hear. "Here is the reality, old man. I am her medical proxy. I hold the power of attorney. If I say, pull the plug, they pull the plug. If I say, transfer her to the county morgue waiting room, that is where she goes. You have no rights here. You are just a visitor. And visitors can be banned. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to snap his neck. It would be so easy. I knew exactly where to press to turn his lights out forever. But if I did that, I would go to jail, and Nia would be alone. He knew it too. He was baiting me. Go home, Silas Chase hissed. Go back to your little trailer or wherever you crawl out from. Go home and die. I can hear you wheezing from here. You are sick, aren't you? Why spend your last few weeks watching her rot? Let me handle this. I will give her a nice funeral. I promise. A nice funeral. The words hung in the air like smoke, and then it clicked. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind with the force of a sledgehammer. Chase didn't just want her gone because he hated her. He wanted her gone because she was worth more dead than alive. I remembered a conversation from last year. Nia told me Chase had taken out a new life insurance policy on both of them. A key person policy for the business, $5 million. If she died during a home invasion, it was a tragic accident. Double indemnity. He gets the sympathy of the public. He gets the freedom to marry his next victim. And he gets $10 million tax-free to save his failing company. He wasn't a grieving husband. He was an investor cashing out a bad asset. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see a man. I saw a target. I saw a structural weakness. You are right, Chase, I said, forcing my muscles to relax. I am sick. I am tired. Maybe I should just go. He looked surprised, then smug. That is the smartest thing you have said all night, Silas. Flight 409 leaves at 6 in the morning. Be on it. He turned his back on me and walked away whistling a tune. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. As soon as he turned the corner, I rushed to the nearest men's restroom. I barely made it to the stall before my knees gave out. I fell onto the dirty tile floor, my chest heaving. The cough started deep in my lungs, a rattling, violent spasm that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. I covered my mouth with my hand, but I couldn't stop it. It went on for a minute, 2 minutes. When it finally subsided, I pulled my hand away. My palm was covered in bright red blood. I stared at it. The contrast of the red blood against my dark skin was stark. The doctor said 2 months. But looking at the amount of blood, I knew he was being optimistic. I probably had weeks, maybe days before I was too weak to stand. I pulled myself up using the handicap rail, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the old man in the mirror. Gray stubble, sunken eyes, hollow cheeks. I looked like a ghost. Chase was right. I was dying. I was weak. I couldn't fight him in court. I couldn't fight him with money. I couldn't even fight him with my fists anymore. But I was an engineer, and engineers don't need to be strong. They just need to be right. I dried my face with a rough paper towel. I needed evidence. I needed something undeniable. The police report was fixed. The witnesses were bought. The house was scrubbed clean. What did I have? I closed my eyes, trying to block out the fluorescent hum of the bathroom lights. I tried to hear Nia's voice. I tried to remember our Sunday calls. What had she complained about? She never complained about the abuse. She was too proud. She complained about the small things, the control. Dad. It's creepy, she had said 3 months ago. He is obsessed with the new cleaning lady. He thinks she is stealing silver. He installed these tiny cameras everywhere, even in the bedroom. He says it's motion activated. He says it's for our protection, but I feel like I'm in a zoo. My eyes snapped open. The bedroom. The police report said she was found in the bedroom. That was where the intruders attacked her. That was where the violence happened. Chase was arrogant. He was a control freak. People like him record everything because they think they own the truth. He would have deleted the footage from the cloud. He would have wiped the app, but he wouldn't destroy the hard drive. Not yet. Because the hard drive contained his trophy. Psychopaths like to relive their victories. He kept the footage. I knew it in my gut. He kept it to watch it, to feel powerful. The footage wasn't gone. It was just hidden, and I knew where he hid his toys. I washed the last of the blood from my hand. I wasn't just an old man with cancer anymore. I was a father on a deadline. I pulled out my flip phone and dialed Dante. Dante, I said, my voice raspy but steady. I need you to get the van and bring your heavy equipment. What are we doing? Pop Dante asked. We are going back to the house, I said. But this time we aren't knocking. We are breaking into the server room. Chase Caldwell wanted me to go home and die. I would do that eventually. But first I was going to make sure that when I went to hell, he was standing right there next to me. The clock was ticking, and I was done playing by the rules. The rain in Atlanta comes down hard in the summer. It falls in thick, warm sheets that turn the asphalt into mirrors and drown out the sound of the city. I was counting on the rain. It was the only cover I had. While the sky opened up over Buckhead, Chase was standing on a podium downtown in a dry, air-conditioned conference room giving a press conference. I had the live stream playing in one earbud. His voice was smooth, polished, and sickeningly fake. He was talking about the launch of Safe Home, his new security app. He was using Nia's tragedy as a marketing hook, telling the reporters that if he had only launched this app a week earlier, his wife would be safe. The audacity of the man was breathtaking. He was selling the cure for the disease he himself had inflicted. I parked my rental car 3 blocks away in a blind spot I had scouted earlier. I pulled my hood up and walked through the downpour. I wasn't just an old man walking in the rain. I was a ghost. My lungs burned with every step, a constant reminder that my own internal clock was ticking faster than the one on Chase's wrist. But pain is good. Pain keeps you sharp. I reached the perimeter of the estate. The electric gate was formidable if you didn't know how it worked. Most people see a lock and think of a key. I see a circuit. I see a flow of electrons that can be interrupted. I didn't go for the gate. I went for the utility box concealed in the landscaping near the curb. It was a standard municipal setup. I knelt in the mud, the water soaking through my jeans instantly. I pulled a customized multi-tool from my pocket. I didn't need to cut the power to the whole house that would trigger a backup generator alert to his phone. I needed to confuse the system. I located the low-voltage control loop for the perimeter sensors. With a steady hand, I bridged 2 contacts with a small copper wire, creating a ghost signal. The system wouldn't shut down, it would just think it was undergoing a firmware update. For the next 10 minutes, the cameras would be recording static loops while the sensors slept. I moved to the side door of the garage. Chase had installed a top-of-the-line biometric smart lock. It required a fingerprint or a code. He probably felt like a king locking his castle with magic. But every smart lock has a dumb flaw. They are powered by batteries, and they have a fail-safe for fire regulations. I used a high-strength magnet I had salvaged from an old speaker, wrapping it in a cloth to muffle the sound. I slid it along the frame until I felt the solenoid inside the lock react to the magnetic pull. It clicked. A soft, mechanical surrender. I was in. The garage smelled of rubber and expensive wax. His Porsche and his Tesla sat there like sleeping beasts. I didn't look at them. I moved to the interior door. This one was unlocked. Arrogance is always the biggest security flaw. He locked the world out, but he didn't think he needed to lock the rooms inside his own fortress. I stepped into the kitchen. It was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stopped and listened. I closed my eyes and visualized the layout of the house. I needed to sever his connection to the outside world before I did anything else. If I triggered a motion sensor inside the house now, it would send a push notification to his phone on the podium. I couldn't let that happen. I found the networking closet in the pantry. It was a mess of blinking blue lights and fiber optic cables. Chase liked to think he was a tech genius, but his cable management was sloppy. I found the main fiber line coming in from the street. I didn't cut it. Cutting it would send a loss of signal alert to the ISP. Instead, I installed a small localized jammer I had built from spare parts. It flooded the router's frequency with white noise. The internet in the house didn't go out, it just slowed to a crawl so significant that no upload could complete. To his phone, it would just look like bad reception. Now I had the run of the house. I didn't go to the bedroom. I knew the camera there was just a lens. The brain was somewhere else. I went to the basement. The door to the basement was heavy solid oak. It was locked with a deadbolt. I picked it in 30 seconds. I had spent 20 years opening crates that didn't want to be opened. A residential deadbolt was child's play. I descended the stairs. The air got cooler, drier. The smell of ozone and electronics grew stronger. The basement wasn't a man cave. It was a data center. Along the far wall sat a server rack that hummed with the sound of 6 high-speed cooling fans. It was an impressive setup for a private residence. This was where Chase kept the things he didn't want Google or Apple to see. This was his personal cloud. I walked up to the terminal. A large, curved monitor sat dark on the desk. I tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life, blindingly bright in the dim room. Enter password. I stared at the prompt. I tried the obvious. Nia's birthday. Incorrect. His own birthday. Incorrect. The date he started his company. Incorrect. After the third attempt, a red warning box appeared. System lockdown imminent. I swore under my breath. I looked at the tower. I could see the hard drives slotted into the bays, 4 of them, RAID configuration. If I just pulled them out, I might corrupt the data. If I tried to guess the password again, the system might wipe itself. Chase was paranoid enough to install a kill switch. I was an engineer. I knew how to build structures and I knew how to take them apart. But this wasn't steel and concrete. This was code. This was a language I didn't speak fluently. I could see the vault, but I didn't have the combination. I looked around the room. On the walls were framed magazine covers featuring Chase, 30 under 30, Innovator of the Year. He was smiling in all of them, that same predatory smile. He was mocking me even here. I needed the data. I needed the footage of what he did to Nia. It was on these drives. I could feel it. The truth was spinning on those magnetic platters at 7,000 revolutions per minute. I couldn't guess the code, but I knew someone who could break the lock. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crashing against the fatigue of my sickness. I dialed the number. "Answer the phone, kid," I whispered. "Come on." "Yo, Silas." Dante's voice was clear. "I am inside," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the cold basement. "I am staring at a server rack. It is custom built. Linux-based, I think. It is encrypted." "Send me a picture of the interface," Dante said, his voice losing its casual slang and shifting into professional focus. I snapped a photo and sent it. There was a pause. A long, agonizing pause where the only sound was the whirring of the fans and the wheezing of my own chest. "Okay," Dante said. "That is a proprietary OS. He built this himself. Or he paid someone a lot of money to build it. It is air-gapped, Silas. That means I can't hack it from here. You can't just plug in a USB. "So what do?" I asked, gripping the edge of the desk. "I can't leave empty-handed, Dante. He is going to come back. You have to steal the brain," Dante said. "What?" "The drives alone won't work without the controller key, which is probably on the motherboard. You need to take the whole tower, Silas." I looked at the server tower. It was a massive steel monolith. It must have weighed 60 pounds. "Silas," Dante asked, his voice soft, "can you carry it? I know you are sick, man. That thing is heavy." I looked at the blinking lights. I thought about Nia lying in that hospital bed, her face swollen and broken. I thought about Chase laughing at his party. I thought about the doctor telling me I had 2 months. I didn't feel the cancer. I didn't feel the arthritis in my knees. I felt a surge of strength that came from a place deeper than muscle. "I will carry it," I said. "If I have to drag it with my teeth, I will carry it," good Dante said. "But Silas, listen to me. As soon as you unplug that machine, an alarm is going to trip. Not a digital one, a physical circuit break. You are going to have maybe 3 minutes before private security rolls up. Chase doesn't rely on the police for his own house. He hires mercenaries. 3 minutes. I looked at the nest of cables at the back of the tower. "I am unplugging it now," I said. "Get the van ready, Dante. I am bringing the package to you." I reached behind the tower. My hand found the thick power cable. I took a deep breath, filling my dying lungs with the cold basement air. "For you, Nia." I yanked the cord. The hum of the fans died instantly. The room plunged into silence. And then a second later, a piercing siren shrieked through the house, loud enough to wake the dead. I wrapped my arms around the heavy steel tower and lifted. A bolt of pain shot through my back, but I gritted my teeth and turned toward the stairs. The clock had started, the hunt was on, and I had the smoking gun in my arms. The server tower sat on the metal workbench in Dante's garage like a black tombstone. It was heavy, cold, and silent, but I knew that inside that metal casing lived the demons that had destroyed my daughter's life. The rain was still hammering against the corrugated tin roof, a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I sat on a rusted stool, my breath coming in shallow, ragged wheezes. The adrenaline from the heist was fading, replaced by the crushing weight of my illness. I could feel the cancer in my lungs, a dull ache that sharpened every time I inhaled the damp air. Dante was working fast. His fingers flew across his mechanical keyboard, the clicking sound like gunfire in the small room. He had bypassed the biometric lock on the server using a backdoor exploit he found on a Russian hacker forum. He didn't look at me. He was in the zone, his face illuminated by the blue glow of 3 different monitors. "We are in pop," Dante said, his voice tight. I leaned forward, ignoring the pain in my back. "What do you see?" "He is running a virtual machine." Dante explained, his eyes scanning lines of code that looked like gibberish to me. He hid the partition deep, standard file structure on the surface. Tax returns, family photos, business contracts, all boring stuff. But there is a hidden volume here. It is labeled System 32, but the file size is massive. 3 terabytes. That is too big for system files. Open it, I commanded. Dante hit a key. The screen flickered and a password prompt appeared. But Dante was ready. He ran a script he had prepared while I was driving over. It was a brute force attack cycling through millions of combinations a second. We watched the progress bar. It felt like watching a fuse burn down to a stick of dynamite. 90%. 95. Gotcha, Dante whispered. The screen changed. The folder opened. It wasn't named System 32 anymore. The real name of the directory appeared on the screen. Discipline. The word hung there glowing in white text against the black background. Discipline. Not accidents, not fights. Discipline. It was a word meant for children, for dogs. It implied that he was the teacher and she was the unruly subject that needed correction. My stomach turned over. Open the first file, I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. Dante hesitated. Silas, maybe you don't want to see this. We have the proof. We can just hand it over to the FBI. Open it, Dante. I need to know. He clicked the file dated 3 days ago. The timestamp was 11:42 p.m. The night of the robbery. A video player popped up. The footage was high-definition 4K quality. It was wide-angle, fisheye lens. I realized with a jolt of horror that I was looking through a GoPro camera. The camera was mounted on someone's head. I saw hands, white hands, Chase's hands. He was adjusting the strap on his forehead in the mirror of the master bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. He smiled. He checked his teeth. He looked like an athlete preparing for a big game. Showtime, Chase said to his reflection. His voice was crystal clear. He turned and walked out of the bathroom into the bedroom. Naya was sitting on the edge of the bed wearing her silk pajamas. She looked up and I saw the fear in her eyes instantly. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. Chase, please, she said. Her voice was small, trembling. I am sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you at dinner. Chase didn't say anything. He just walked toward her. The camera shook slightly with his steps. It was sickening. It made me feel like I was him, like I was the monster stalking my own child. He stopped in front of her. You didn't mean to... Chase said, his tone calm, almost conversational. You embarrassed me, Naya. CEOs don't get interrupted by their wives when they are closing a deal. You made me look weak. You made me look like I can't control my own household. I promise I won't do it again, Nia pleaded. She raised her hands to protect her face. Chase sighed, a long, disappointed sigh. I know you won't, babe, because we are going to fix this behavior right now. The first blow came so fast the camera blurred. He backhanded her. The sound of his knuckles hitting her cheekbone was wet and loud. Naya screamed and fell back onto the pillows. I flinched. I physically flinched in the chair. Get up, Chase commanded. Sit up straight. He wasn't in a rage. He wasn't out of control. That was the most terrifying part. He was completely calm. He was lecturing her like she was an employee who had missed a deadline. He grabbed her by the hair and pulled her face close to the lens. Look at the camera, Nia. Apologize to the Brotherhood. I froze. The Brotherhood. On the side of the screen, Dante opened a chat log that was linked to the video file. It wasn't just a recording, it was a live stream archive. This video had been broadcasted. I looked at the comments scrolling down the side of the archived video. User Alpha King 99 wrote, "Good form Chase. Put her in her place." User Crypto God wrote, "She needs to learn respect. Don't go easy on her." User Titan Logic wrote, "This is why I don't let my wife speak in public." 1010 lesson. There were hundreds of them. Men, rich men, powerful men. They were watching my daughter being tortured like it was a sporting event. They were cheering. They were betting on it. Chase threw her against the nightstand. The lamp shattered. That was the sound I had heard in my nightmares. He stood over her, breathing heavily now, but still talking, still preaching. Pain is a teacher, Nia. I do this because I love you. I do this because I have to mold you into the perfect partner. You are sloppy. You are emotional. But I am going to make you perfect. He raised his fist again. Stop it! I roared at the screen. Stop it! I grabbed a heavy glass jar filled with screws from the workbench and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, sending metal shrapnel flying across the room. Dante jumped up and slammed the laptop shut. That's enough, Silas. That's enough. I stood up, my chair clattering to the floor. I couldn't breathe. The rage was choking me. I felt like my head was going to explode. I walked in a tight circle, my hands pulling at my own hair. He filmed it, Dante. I gasped. He filmed it for fun. He filmed it for his friends. I reached into the back of my waistband and pulled out the old M1911 pistol I had carried since the war. The metal was warm against my skin. I racked the slide. The sound was loud and final in the small garage. I know where he is, I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. He is at the hospital. He is sitting next to her. I am going to go there. I am going to walk into that room. And I am going to put a bullet in his brain. And then I am going to put a bullet in every single man who commented on that video. I turned toward the door. I didn't care about the cancer. I didn't care about the law. I was going to wash this sin away with blood. Silas, stop, Dante yelled. He stepped in front of me, blocking the door. Move, Dante. No. I raised the gun. I wasn't going to shoot him, but I needed him to know I was serious. Move, son. This ends tonight. If you kill him, he wins, Dante shouted, not flinching, even though the barrel was pointed at his chest. I lowered the gun slightly. What are you talking about? If you kill him, he becomes a victim, Dante said, speaking fast, desperate. The media will spin it. The crazy old veteran father-in-law murdered the grieving husband. You will go to prison for the last 2 months of your life. Nia will wake up alone. She will be the daughter of a murderer, and Chase's estate will keep the money. She will be left with nothing but trauma and debt. He took a step closer to me. Look at that video, Silas. Look at what he cares about. He cares about his image. He cares about his control. He cares about being the alpha. If you shoot him, he dies a martyr. He dies thinking he was right. I lowered the gun to my side. My arm felt heavy. So what do? I whispered. Do I let him get away with it? No, Dante said. His eyes were cold now, harder than I had ever seen them. We don't kill him. We destroy him. We take everything he loves. We take his company. We take his reputation. We take his money. We take his freedom. We make him watch as the whole world sees him for the small, weak, pathetic coward he really is. Dante pointed to the server. We have the list of names in that chat group, Silas. Judges, politicians, CEOs. If we leak this, we don't just take down Chase. We take down the whole network. We burn the entire kingdom to the ground. I looked at the gun in my hand. Then I looked at the server. Dante was right. A bullet was too quick. A bullet was mercy. Chase Caldwell didn't deserve mercy. He deserved to live. He deserved to live long enough to see himself become the most hated man in America. I engaged the safety on the pistol and tucked it back into my jeans. You are right, I said. I looked at Dante. Can you get this video onto the big screen? Can you hack his presentation? Dante smiled. It was a vicious, dangerous smile. Pop, I can hack the Times Square billboards if you want, but tomorrow at his keynote speech, that is going to be child's play. I nodded. I felt the cold calm of the soldier returning. The rage was still there, but now it was focused. It was a laser, not a bomb. Let's get to work, I said. We have a show to produce, and God help him when the curtain goes up. The television in the hospital waiting room was mounted high on the wall out of reach, but the volume was loud enough to drill into my skull. It was a local news station, the kind that feeds on tragedy and vomits out human interest stories to sell detergent. And there he was, my son-in-law, Chase Caldwell. His face filled the screen, that perfect chiseled jawline, that winning smile that had fooled my daughter and apparently half of America. The headline at the bottom of the screen read in bold, urgent letters, Tech Visionary Chase Caldwell launches Safe Home app amidst family tragedy. I sat there, my body aching from the heist the night before, staring at the monster who had beaten my child. On the screen, Chase was standing in front of a sleek, modern background, wearing a black turtleneck like he was the next Steve Jobs. He looked somber but brave. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world with grace. We live in dangerous times, the TV version of Chase said, his voice thick with calculated emotion. Last week, my own sanctuary was violated. My wife, the love of my life, was brutally attacked in our own bedroom. If we had better security, if we had smarter detection, she might be awake right now. That is why I pushed my team to launch Safe Home early, because I don't want any other husband to feel the helplessness I feel today. The reporter nodded sympathetically, practically wiping a tear from her eye. Mr. Caldwell, you are so brave to be working through this pain. You truly are the husband of the year. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Husband of the year. The man was a predator masquerading as a protector. Safe home wasn't about safety. I knew that now. It was about surveillance. It was the same technology he had used to track Nia's movements, to watch her every breath, to turn her home into a prison. And now he was selling that prison to millions of families for $99 a year. I stood up my knees, protesting. I couldn't watch it anymore. I walked back to the ICU. The nurses' station was buzzing. I could hear them whispering. "Did you see the interview? He is so handsome." Poor guy. They were buying it. Everyone was buying it. Dante was right. If I had shot him last night, the world would have mourned a hero. They needed to see the monster under the mask. I entered Nia's room. The silence here was heavy, broken only by the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. I walked to her bedside and took her hand. It felt thinner today. "I am going to fix this baby girl," I whispered. "I promise." The door flew open behind me. It wasn't a doctor. It was a storm of activity. Two assistants in sharp suits walked in, first one holding a garment bag, the other tapping furiously on a tablet. And then Chase walked in. He wasn't wearing the black turtleneck from the interview. He was wearing a tuxedo, a three-piece midnight blue tuxedo that probably cost more than the house I grew up in. He looked like he was going to the Oscars. Chase stopped when he saw me. The mask slipped for a second. His eyes narrowed and his lip curled in disgust. He looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet that the cleaners had missed. "Get out," he said. "No hello. No, how is she? Just a command." I didn't move. I stood my ground, keeping my hand on Nia's. "This is my daughter's room, Chase. This is a staging area, Silas," he snapped, checking his reflection in the glass of the window. "I have a camera crew coming in 5 minutes. We are doing a segment for Good Morning America before the keynote speech tonight. They want a shot of me holding her hand, looking devastated but hopeful. It tests well with the suburban demographic." He turned to his assistant. "Fix her hair. She looks messy. And put some concealer on those bruises. We want her to look tragic, not terrifying." The assistant rushed forward with a makeup kit. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You are not touching her," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You are not putting makeup on a coma patient for a photo op." Chase laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Silas, you really don't get it, do you? This isn't personal. This is business. Her tragedy is the launchpad for my company's stock. If the stock goes up, I can pay for her medical bills. If the stock crashes, well, maybe we have to unplug the machines to save costs, so get out of my way." He stepped closer to me. He was taller than me, younger, stronger, but he didn't have the eyes of a man who had seen war. He had the eyes of a bully who had never been punched in the mouth. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a money clip. It was gold. He peeled off a crisp, new $100 bill. He crumpled it into a ball and threw it at my chest. It bounced off my leather jacket and fell to the floor. "Here," he said. "Take a taxi to the airport. Go back to your swamp. I don't want to see your face when the cameras roll. You ruin the aesthetic. You look like failure." I looked down at the money. Ben Franklin stared up at me from the sterile hospital linoleum. My first instinct was to grab him by the throat. I wanted to smash his face into the wall until he looked just like Nia. I wanted to scream the truth until the windows shattered. My hand twitched toward my waistband where the gun was still tucked, but then I heard Dante's voice in my head. "Let him win the battle so we can win the war. Make him overconfident." Chase was waiting for me to explode. He wanted me to cause a scene. If I hit him, he could call security. He could have me arrested. He could ban me from the hospital legally. And then he would be alone with Nia. I couldn't let that happen. I had to be smarter. I had to be the engineer, not the brawler. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to slump. I let the anger drain out of my face, replacing it with a look of defeat. I bent down slowly, my old joints cracking audibly, and picked up the $100 bill. I smoothed it out with trembling hands. I didn't look at Chase. I looked at the floor. "You are right," I mumbled. "I can't do anything here. I am just in the way." Chase snorted. A sound of pure victory. Finally, a moment of clarity from the old man. "Yes, Silas, you are in the way. You have always been in the way. Nia was always too attached to you, Daddy's little girl. Well, look where that got her. She needed a leader, not a friend." He walked over to the mirror and adjusted his bow tie. Go on then. The airport shuttle leaves in 20 minutes. Don't miss it. I put the money in my pocket. It felt dirty, like it was covered in slime. I will go, I said. I looked up at him one last time. I forced a weak, pathetic smile onto my face. But Chase, can I ask you one thing? He rolled his eyes, checking his watch. Make it fast. I just want to see you succeed, I said. I want to see how high you can fly. Tonight. The keynote. It is going to be big, right? Chase preened. He puffed out his chest. It is going to be historic, Silas. The whole country will be watching. It is the beginning of a new empire. I nodded. Good. I want the whole country to watch too. I turned and walked to the door. I didn't look back at Nia. I couldn't. If I looked at her, I would break. I walked out into the hallway, past the camera crew that was setting up their lights. I walked past the nurses who looked at me with pity, thinking I was abandoning my daughter. I walked all the way to the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the noise of the hospital. As the elevator descended, the weak smile vanished from my face. My expression hardened into stone. I looked at the $100 bill in my hand. I didn't put it in my wallet. I tore it in half. Then I tore it again, and again, until it was just green confetti. He thought he had bought my silence. He thought he had bought my departure. He didn't know that he had just paid for his own funeral. I wasn't going to the airport. I was going to the venue. I was going to be there in the front row, hidden in the shadows. He wanted the whole country to watch fine. I would give him an audience. I pulled out my phone and texted Dante. The package is delivered. The target is confirmed. Initiate Phase 2. Chase Caldwell was about to have the most historic night of his life, but not in the way he thought. The wolf was at the door, but the pigs were too busy partying to hear the huff and puff. I stepped out of the hospital into the blinding sunlight. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Downtown, I said. The convention center. And step on it. I have a show to catch. Dante's garage smelled of stale pizza and ozone. It was the smell of a war room. On the screens in front of us, the countdown clock for Chase's keynote speech was ticking down. 4 hours remaining. 4 hours until the man who beat my daughter walked onto a stage to be crowned the king of family safety. Dante stopped typing and spun his chair around. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes matched the heaviness in my own chest. Pop, we have a problem, Dante said. I was cleaning my gun, a habit I couldn't break even though I knew I wouldn't use it. What kind of problem? I just ran a probe on the convention center's network, he explained, pointing to a complex diagram on the monitor. Chase is paranoid. And he is smart. The audio-visual system for the main stage is air-gapped. I frowned. I know bridges and I know explosives, but I don't know cyber warfare. Speak English, son. It means the system running the big screen and the sound system isn't connected to the internet, Dante said. It is a closed loop. I can't hack it from here. I can't upload the video remotely. If we post it on YouTube or Twitter, Chase's algorithms will flag it and take it down before it gets 100 views. He owns the moderation bot, Silas. He will bury the truth under a mountain of copyright claims. I set the gun down. So we need a hard line. Exactly, Dante nodded. We need physical access. Someone has to plug a drive directly into the master console in the AV booth, and that booth is behind 3 layers of private security. Chase hired a firm called Citadel, ex-military. Guys who don't ask questions, they just break arms. I looked at the diagram of the convention center. I saw the red zones. I saw the guard posts. It was a fortress. But every fortress has a service entrance. Every castle has a sewer. Give me the drive, I said. Dante looked at me like I was crazy. Silas, you can't go in there. You can barely walk without coughing up blood. If you get caught, they will beat you to death before the cops even arrive. Let me do it. I can sneak in. I'm fast. No. I shook my head. You are young. You are a black man in a hoodie. To those security guards, you are a threat. You are a target. They will tackle you the second you step on the property. I stood up, fighting the wave of dizziness that washed over me. But me, I am just an old man. I am invisible. People like Chase, people with money and power, they don't see people like me. They look right through us. To them, I am just part of the furniture. I am just the help. I walked over to the corner of the garage where Dante kept his disguises. I pulled out a gray jumpsuit. It was stained and worn. I found a matching gray cap. "Do you have a fake ID?" I asked. Dante sighed, realizing he couldn't stop me. He opened a drawer and tossed me a laminated card. It identified me as Robert Johnson, an employee of Clean Co. Facilities. "I need a mop bucket," I said, "and a trash cart. A big one." Dante handed me a small silver USB drive. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it carried the weight of a nuclear bomb. This was the payload. This was the truth. I put the drive in my sock. "You are going to walk into the lion's den with a mop?" Dante asked, his voice thick with worry. "I am a combat engineer, Dante," I said, buttoning the jumpsuit. "My job is to clear the path. I am going to walk right up to the throne, and I am going to pull the pin." The drive to the convention center was a blur of pain. I had taken 3 extra painkillers, but the cancer was eating at my ribs, a gnawing constant reminder that my time was running out. But the pain focused me. It reminded me that I had nothing to lose. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I parked the van at the loading dock. The security checkpoint was buzzing with activity. Trucks were unloading sound equipment, catering supplies, and decorations. I pulled the brim of my cap down low. I grabbed the handle of the trash cart. It rattled on the asphalt. I walked up to the guard booth. The guard was a massive guy with a shaved head and an earpiece. He was checking a clipboard. He looked at the expensive SUVs rolling in, waving them through with a smile. Then he looked at me. His eyes didn't even focus on my face. He saw the gray jumpsuit. He saw the trash cart. He saw an old, tired black man. ID. He grunted, not looking up from his list. I handed him the fake badge. My hand trembled slightly, but I played it off as the frailty of age. "Service entrance is around the back, Pops," he said, tossing the ID back at me. "And hurry up. Mr. Caldwell wants the floors shining before the VIPs arrive." "Yes, sir," I mumbled, affecting a slight stoop in my posture. "Just doing my job, sir." He waved me through. I was in. I pushed the cart through the bowels of the convention center. The service corridors were a maze of concrete and fluorescent lights. It smelled of bleach and floor wax. It smelled like my life before the army. It smelled like the life Chase thought I deserved. I made my way toward the main hall. The noise grew louder with every step. I could hear the bass of the sound system being tested. Check 1, 2. Check. It thumped against my chest, rattling my sick lungs. I emerged from the service tunnel into the main auditorium. It was massive. Thousands of seats were arranged in perfect rows. The stage was lit with blue and purple lights, the colors of Chase's company. A gigantic screen 60 feet wide hung above the stage. It was currently displaying the Safe Home logo, a shield wrapping around a happy family. The irony made me want to vomit. There were security guards everywhere. Citadel agents in black suits stood at the foot of the stage at the exits and flanking the technical booth in the center of the room. That booth was my target. It was a raised platform surrounded by glass where the technicians controlled the lights, the sound, and the video. I gripped the handle of my cart. I needed to get up those stairs into that booth and plug the drive into the main server without being stopped. I started pushing the cart down the main aisle. A group of young tech executives in hoodies and blazers were standing in the aisle laughing and drinking coffee. I pushed the cart toward them. "Excuse me, folks," I said, keeping my head down. "Trash pickup." They didn't move. They didn't even hear me. I was invisible. I nudged the leg of one guy with the cart. He turned around, annoyed. "Watch it, old man," he snapped. "Sorry, sir. Just cleaning up," I apologized. He stepped aside, brushing his jeans as if my poverty might be contagious. I kept moving. I was 50 feet from the booth. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would trigger the cardiac monitors in the hospital 5 miles away. Then I saw him. The head of security. He wasn't a regular guard. He was wearing a tactical earpiece and carrying himself with the unmistakable tension of a man looking for trouble. He was standing right at the bottom of the stairs leading to the AV booth. He was scanning the crowd. I couldn't just walk past him. He was a professional. He would check my credentials. He would see that Robert Johnson wasn't on the list for the technical crew. I stopped the cart. I needed a distraction. I needed to create a breach. I looked at my cart. I had a spray bottle of industrial cleaner and a bucket of dirty water. I looked at the power strip running along the floor, feeding the lights for the aisle. I took a deep breath. The cancer spiked in my chest, a sharp stabbing pain that nearly doubled me over. I used the pain. I let it buckle my knees. I stumbled forward, intentionally crashing the cart into the row of chairs. The bucket of dirty water tipped over, splashing across the floor and soaking the power strip. Sparks flew. A loud pop echoed through the hall as a breaker tripped, killing the lights in the left section of the auditorium. The head of security turned immediately, his hand going to his radio. "What the hell?" he shouted, running toward the commotion. That was my window. While he was yelling at the clumsy janitor I had pretended to be, I slipped away from the cart. In the confusion, in the semi-darkness of the flickering emergency lights, I moved. I moved faster than an old man should. I moved like the soldier I used to be. I ducked under the velvet rope and scrambled up the stairs to the AV booth. The door was cracked open. The technicians inside were distracted, looking out at the smoking power strip, laughing at the mess. I slipped inside the booth and crouched behind a rack of amplifiers. I was in the brain of the beast. The main console was right there, a bank of monitors glowing in the dark. I saw the input port. It was labeled Master Source. I reached into my sock and pulled out the USB drive. My hand was shaking uncontrollably now. The exertion had drained me. I could taste iron in my mouth. Blood. I coughed, muffling the sound in my sleeve. I crawled forward. Just 3 more feet. Suddenly the door to the booth opened wide. "Hey!" a voice boomed. "Who is back there?" I froze. I was on my hands and knees, hidden only by the shadow of the mixing board. I saw a pair of black tactical boots step into the booth. It was the head of security. He hadn't bought the distraction completely. He had circled back. "Come out," he ordered, his hand resting on his holster. "I know someone is back there." I gripped the USB drive. I was trapped. I had no weapon. I had no strength left to fight him. But I had the element of surprise. And I had the one thing they didn't expect. I wasn't trying to escape. I was on a suicide mission. I didn't stand up with my hands raised. I lunged, not at him but at the console. I threw my body forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the shout of the guard. My target wasn't the man. My target was the port. I slammed the USB drive into the slot just as a heavy boot kicked me in the ribs. The pain was blinding. I curled into a ball, gasping for air. The guard grabbed me by the collar of my jumpsuit and hauled me up. "You made a big mistake, old man," he growled, slamming me against the wall. He reached for the drive to pull it out, but he was too late. On the screens, a progress bar appeared. It was bright green, and it was moving fast. Auto upload initiated. Dante's code was executing. It wasn't just playing the video, it was locking the system. It was overriding the controls. The guard looked at the screen, then at me. "What did you do?" he whispered. I smiled. My teeth were stained with blood. I just lit the fuse, I wheezed. He threw me to the ground and radioed for backup. "Take him to the holding room. Chase doesn't need to see this garbage before the show." 2 more guards rushed in. They dragged me out of the booth. My feet dragged on the floor. I couldn't walk anymore. They dragged me down the stairs, past the confused technicians, past the expensive equipment. They threw me into a concrete room in the back hallway and locked the door. I lay on the cold floor, staring up at the ceiling. Every breath was a battle. My ribs were definitely broken. But in the darkness, I started to laugh, a dry, rattling laugh. They thought they had stopped me. They thought locking me up would save the show. They didn't know that the virus was already in the veins of their system. The drive was in. The payload was loaded. And in 20 minutes, when Chase Caldwell walked onto that stage and said, "I love my family," the whole world was going to see exactly how he loved them. I closed my eyes and waited for the show to begin. The USB drive was in. The green light on the small plastic stick blinked rhythmically, a tiny heartbeat in the semi-darkness of the audio-visual booth. I watched the progress bar on the monitor, 5%, 10%. It was moving, but it was moving agonizingly slow. Every second felt like an hour. The air in the booth was stagnant and hot, smelling of ozone and dusty electronics. I was crouched behind a rack of amplifiers, my knees pressed against the hard industrial carpet. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the exertion. My body was failing me. The adrenaline that had carried me this far was starting to wear off, leaving behind the raw, jagged reality of my condition. And then it happened. The tickle started deep in my chest. It wasn't a normal cough. It was the cancer. It was a physical mass, a demon living inside my lungs, deciding that now, right at the precipice of victory, was the time to wake up. I clamped my hand over my mouth. I bit down on my lip until I tasted copper. I tried to swallow the convulsion, but you cannot swallow an earthquake. My chest heaved. My diaphragm spasmed. I let out a sound, a muffled, wet hacking noise that sounded like a saw cutting through wet wood. I couldn't stop it. The force of the cough doubled me over. I felt something warm and wet push past my fingers. I pulled my hand away and looked at the floor. Even in the dim light of the instrument panels, the color was unmistakable. Bright arterial red. A spray of blood across the black anti-static mat. I gasped for air, trying to quiet my breathing, but the wheezing was loud. Too loud. I heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful footsteps on the metal stairs leading up to the booth. I froze. Through the mesh wiring of the equipment rack, I saw him. It was the head of security, the man Chase paid to keep his secrets. He was wearing an earpiece and a suit that cost more than my car. He hadn't come up because of the noise. He was just doing his rounds. But he stopped. He stopped right at the door of the booth. He looked down. The booth door was slightly ajar, and on the floor just outside the threshold where I had stumbled in was a single drop of blood. A tiny red beacon on the gray concrete. He frowned. He touched his earpiece. "Command, this is Sector 4. I have an anomaly at the AV booth. Looks like blood." My blood ran cold. He took a step forward. He pushed the door open. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the mixing boards, the monitors, and moving steadily toward the amplifier rack where I was hiding. I was trapped. I was an old man with no weapon huddled in a corner, waiting to be found. If he found me now, he would see the drive, he would see the upload, he would pull the plug, and everything I had suffered for would be for nothing. Chase would win. I needed a distraction. I needed to move his eyes. I needed to move him. I looked around my cramped prison. Wires. Thousands of wires. XLR cables, power cords, fiber optics. My eyes landed on a junction box mounted on the wall about 2 feet from my head. It was the main dimmer pack for the stage lighting. High voltage. Dangerous. I looked at the flashlight beam. It was 3 feet away. 2 feet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my multi-tool. My hands were slick with sweat and blood, but the muscle memory of 30 years in the engineering corps took over. I didn't think. I just acted. I reached behind the rack and found the thick power cable feeding the stage-left spotlights. I didn't cut it. Cutting it is silent. I needed noise. I needed drama. I jammed the metal pliers of my multi-tool into the exposed coupling of the cable bridging the live wire and the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut. The sound was like a gunshot. A massive electrical crack that echoed through the entire convention center. A shower of blue and white sparks exploded from the wall, raining down like fireworks. The lights in the entire left wing of the auditorium flickered and died. The hum of the amplifiers turned into a screech of feedback. The security chief jumped back, shielding his eyes from the sparks. "What the hell?" he shouted, spinning around to look at the smoking panel. "Command. We have a major electrical failure in the booth. I repeat, major failure. Send maintenance now." He turned his back to me, moving toward the smoke to assess the damage. He was distracted. The chaos was my cover. I moved. I didn't stand up. I crawled. I slithered across the floor like a snake moving under the long desk of the mixing console. Every movement sent a fresh spike of agony through my chest, but I gritted my teeth. I reached the far side of the booth where a small service hatch led to the catwalks above the stage. It was a tight squeeze, a young man's exit. But I wasn't a man anymore. I was a desperate father. I pushed the hatch open and dragged myself through. As I pulled my legs through, my pocket caught on the metal latch. I heard a small plastic clatter. I froze. I looked back. My pill bottle. The strong morphine prescription the VA doctor had given me. It was lying on the floor of the booth right next to the leg of the chair. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the plastic cap. "Hey, is someone there?" The security chief had turned around. The flashlight beam swung toward the hatch. I pulled my hand back. I couldn't risk it. If I grabbed the bottle, he would see my arm. He would see me. I let the hatch slam shut silently and scrambled into the darkness of the catwalks. I lay there in the dust 30 feet above the stage, listening. I heard the guard's footsteps walk to where I had been. I heard him stop. "What is this?" he muttered. I heard the rattle of the pill bottle being picked up. "Silas Mercer," he read aloud. I closed my eyes. He had my name. He knew who was in the building. The clock wasn't just ticking anymore. It was screaming. I had escaped the cage, but I had left my dog tags behind. They knew I was here, they knew I was sick, and they knew I was dangerous. But as I lay there catching my breath in the dusty air, I looked down at the stage below. Chase Caldwell was walking out for his sound check. He looked perfect. He looked untouchable. He didn't know that directly above his head a dying man was watching him. He didn't know that the upload was already at 40%. "Keep the pills," I whispered into the darkness. "I don't need them. The pain reminds me of why I am here." I started to crawl along the catwalk, moving toward the shadows of the lighting rig. The hunt had changed. I wasn't just the intruder anymore. I was the ghost in the machine, and I was going to haunt him until the bitter end. I stumbled out of the service exit into the alleyway behind the convention center. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't numb the fire in my chest. My ribs were screaming with every step, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood in the back of my throat. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I walked 3 blocks down the rain-slicked pavement, keeping to the shadows like a stray dog, until I saw the flickering neon sign of a dive bar called the Rusty Nail. It was a dark hole in the wall, the kind of place where men went to drink away their sins or their sorrows. I pushed the heavy door open, and the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke washed over me. It was a familiar smell. It smelled like the places I used to haunt after the war when the noise in my head was too loud to sleep. I limped to the bar and sat on a cracked vinyl stool in the far corner. The bartender was a woman with hard eyes and a scar on her chin. She looked at my gray jumpsuit stained with grease and dirt. She looked at the way I was holding my side. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just put a coaster down. "Whiskey," I croaked. "A double. Make it the cheap stuff." She poured it. I downed it in one swallow. The burn of the alcohol met the burn of the cancer, and for a second the world stopped spinning. "Turn up the TV," I said, pointing to the screen mounted above the rows of dusty bottles. She shrugged and grabbed the remote. The volume rose, and suddenly the silence of the bar was replaced by the roaring sound of applause. There he was. Chase Caldwell was walking onto the stage. The camera panned across the audience. It was a sea of people. 3,000 faces, all turned toward him like sunflowers turning toward a toxic sun. They were standing. They were cheering. They were clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. I saw the front row. I saw the mayor of Atlanta. I saw the chief of police. I saw investors and tech journalists. They weren't just applauding a man. They were applauding a brand. They were applauding success. Chase reached the center of the stage and the lights dimmed, focusing a single spotlight on him. He looked magnificent. I had to give him credit. The devil knows how to dress. He was wearing that midnight blue tuxedo and his hair was perfectly coiffed. He raised a hand and the crowd fell silent instantly. He had them in the palm of his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft, humble, almost breaking with emotion. "Thank you for this welcome. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of technology. But as many of you know, my heart is heavy tonight." He paused. He looked down at the floor as if gathering his strength. The camera zoomed in on his face. He looked devastated. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. "Last week my world was shattered," Chase continued. "I realized that all the money in the world, all the success, all the accolades mean nothing if you cannot protect the ones you love." He pressed a button on a clicker in his hand. Behind him, on the massive 60-foot screen, a picture appeared. It was Nia. But it wasn't the Nia lying in the hospital bed with tubes down her throat and her face purple with bruises. It wasn't the Nia I had seen that morning. It was a lie. The photo had been photoshopped. Heavily. Her skin was glowing. Her smile was bright. She looked radiant. But I recognized the dress. She was wearing the same pajamas she had been wearing in the video where he beat her. He had taken a still frame from that night, a frame before the violence started, and he had digitally scrubbed it clean. He had erased the fear in her eyes. He had erased the reality of her pain and replaced it with a plastic perfection. My wife Nia Chase said, his voice trembling. "She is fighting for her life right now, and while she fights, I made a vow. I vowed that no other husband would ever have to feel this helplessness. I took my pain and I turned it into code. I turned it into a shield. I gripped my whiskey glass so hard I felt a hairline crack form under my thumb. The audacity, the sheer absolute evil of it. He was using her image, the image of the woman he had destroyed, to sell subscriptions. He was standing on her broken body to reach a higher tax bracket. I looked down at my phone. It was sitting on the sticky bar top next to my glass. The screen was dark. "Come on, Dante," I whispered. "Tell me we are ready." On the TV, Chase was wiping a tear from his eye. A single perfect tear. "The police did their best," Chase said. "But the police cannot be everywhere. We need to take security into our own hands. We need Safe Home. With our new proprietary AI, we don't just record crime. We predict it. We stop it before it happens." The crowd murmured in awe. "Predict it," I thought. "You couldn't predict your own downfall." My phone buzzed. I looked down. A single text message from Dante. "Payload is active. Audio bridge is secure. We have control. Waiting for your signal." I looked back up at the screen. Chase was pacing the stage now, finding his rhythm. He was energized by the lie. "Some people say that privacy is dead," Chase shouted, his voice rising with passion. "I say that privacy is a luxury we can no longer afford. Would you rather be private, or would you rather be safe? Would you rather have secrets, or would you rather have your family alive?" The crowd cheered. "Safe. Safe," they chanted. It was terrifying. He was brainwashing them. He was selling them fear, and they were buying it with both hands. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I remembered the sound of Naya screaming in the video. I remembered the sound of his knuckles hitting her face. I remembered him laughing in the kitchen while she was in a coma. I looked at the bartender. "Can I get another one?" I asked. She poured the whiskey. "You watching this guy?" she asked, nodding at the TV. "He seems like a good man. Sad story about his wife." I took the shot. The liquid burned. "Yeah," I said. "He is a real storyteller. But every story has an ending." I looked at the phone again. Chase raised his arms, embracing the applause, basking in the love of the millions. "I love you, Naya," he shouted to the ceiling. "This is for you." I typed 2 words into the phone. "Burn him." I hit send. I watched the screen. For a second, nothing happened. Chase kept smiling. The crowd kept cheering. And then the massive screen behind him flickered. The beautiful photoshopped image of Nia vanished. The logo of Safe Home vanished. The screen went black. The audio in the auditorium cut out. The feedback screech was gone. A low, ominous hum filled the room. Chase turned around confused. He tapped his microphone. It was dead. He looked toward the AV booth, the booth where I had been 20 minutes ago. He waved his hand, signaling for the technicians to fix it. But they couldn't fix it. The virus was in the veins. And then the sound started. It wasn't the smooth jazz he had played at his party, and it wasn't the heroic orchestral music of his presentation. It was a sound that made the blood in my veins turn to ice, even though I had heard it before. It was the sound of a woman crying, a soft, terrified whimpering. The crowd in the auditorium fell silent. You could see the confusion on their faces. They looked around, thinking it was part of the show. A dramatic intro, maybe. Then came the voice, Chase's voice. But not the stage voice. This was the voice from the bedroom, cold, cruel. "Look at the camera, Nia. Apologize to the Brotherhood." Chase froze. I saw his body go rigid. He recognized the recording. He knew exactly what was coming. He started waving his hands frantically at the booth. "Cut it," he mouthed. "Cut it now." But the giant screen flared to life, and this time there was no Photoshop. The video started playing. The raw, unedited 4K footage from the GoPro. The first slap echoed through the convention center, booming out of the massive concert speakers. It sounded like a cannon shot. I saw the crowd flinch. Thousands of people recoiled in unison. In the bar, the bartender dropped the glass she was cleaning. It shattered on the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. On the screen, Chase, the real Chase, grabbed Nia by the hair. "Pain is a teacher," the voice boomed. I sat there in the shadows of the bar, watching the monster on stage. He looked small now. He looked terrified. He looked like a rat trapped in a cage of light. The judgment day had arrived, and it was being broadcast in high definition. The whiskey in my glass was trembling, not because of the cheap refrigeration in the bar, but because my hand was shaking with a mixture of rage and anticipation. I sat on the cracked vinyl stool of the Rusty Nail, my eyes glued to the television screen mounted above the rows of dusty liquor bottles. The pain in my chest was a dull, constant roar, a reminder that the clock on my life was winding down fast. But for the first time in weeks, the pain didn't matter. All that mattered was the man in the $3,000 tuxedo standing on that stage. Chase Caldwell, my son-in-law. The monster who had broken my daughter's body was now trying to break her spirit in front of the entire nation. He looked perfect. The stage lighting was designed to make him look like a savior. He paced back and forth with the practiced ease of a preacher, his voice dipping low with emotion as he spoke about family and protection. The camera cut to the audience. I saw tears. I saw people nodding in agreement. They were eating it up. They were swallowing the poison because it was wrapped in a beautiful package. Chase stopped in the center of the stage. He looked directly into the camera, which meant he was looking directly at me. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice soft and intimate. "I want to show you my definition of love. Love is not just flowers and chocolates. Love is discipline. Love is structure. Love is doing whatever it takes to keep your family on the right path." He raised his hand and pointed to the massive 60-foot screen behind him. "Watch this," he whispered. He expected a montage. He expected slow-motion clips of him holding Naya's hand walking on the beach looking like the perfect couple. He expected the propaganda film his marketing team had spent weeks editing. But Dante and I had a different definition of love. The screen behind him didn't fade to black. It cut. Hard. It was a violent visual interruption like a slap to the face. The speakers, which had been playing soft, emotional piano music, let out a sharp electronic screech that made the front row cover their ears. Then the screen went solid black. For a second, the entire auditorium was silent. Chase frowned, turning his head slightly to the side, confused by the technical glitch. He tapped his microphone, expecting a quick fix. But then the text appeared. It wasn't the sleek corporate font of his company. It was raw, jagged red text that looked like it had been carved into the digital darkness. The real footage. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. Was this part of the show? Was this some edgy marketing campaign? Then the video started. It wasn't the polished cinematic footage Chase had prepared. It was shaky. It was grainy. It was the raw, unedited feed from the GoPro camera Chase had worn on his own head. The first thing the audience saw were his hands, pale, manicured hands adjusting the camera strap in the bathroom mirror. The angle was wide, distorting his reflection, but the face was unmistakable. It was Chase. But not the Chase on stage. This Chase had eyes that were dilated with a sick excitement. "Showtime," the Chase in the video said. The audio wasn't mixed. It was loud and distorted, booming through the convention center's massive array of speakers. It sounded like God himself was speaking from the heavens, but the words were the words of a devil. The camera moved. It walked out of the bathroom and into the bedroom. And there she was. Nia. She was sitting on the bed wearing her silk pajamas, looking small and terrified. When she looked up at the camera, the fear in her eyes was so raw, so visceral, that I saw the mayor of Atlanta in the front row bring her hand up to her mouth. "Chase, please," the Nia in the video begged. Her voice was thin, trembling. The Chase on stage froze. He stood there, his arms still extended toward the screen, his perfect smile frozen into a mask of absolute horror. He knew. In that split second, he knew exactly what was happening. He dropped his arm as if it had been burned. "Cut it," he hissed at the side of the stage. "Cut the feed." But his microphone was still live. His whisper was amplified, echoing through the hall, mixing with the audio from the video. On the screen, the violence began. It happened fast. The Chase in the video lunged forward. The camera jerked violently. There was a sickening wet thud, the sound of a fist hitting flesh. Nia screamed. It wasn't a movie scream. It was the guttural, animalistic sound of a human being in true agony. It was a sound that stripped the paint off the walls. The audience gasped. It was a collective sound, a sucking in of breath from 3,000 people at once. On the screen, Nia fell back against the headboard. Blood, real bright red blood, sprayed across the white pillowcase. "Get up," the Chase in the video roared. "Sit up straight, you useless piece of trash." The slur he used next was one I will not repeat, but it was a word that cut through the polite society of that room like a knife. It was a racial slur, so hateful, so archaic, that it instantly shattered the illusion of the progressive modern tech CEO. The Chase on stage began to panic. He waved his arms frantically at the control booth, the booth where I had been just 30 minutes ago. "Turn it off," he screamed. His voice cracked. "It is a hack. It is a deepfake. Turn it off." But the technicians in the booth couldn't do anything. The virus was locked in. The system was overriding their commands. They were just spectators now, like everyone else. The video continued. It was relentless. "Look at the camera," the voice in the video commanded. Nia's face filled the 60-foot screen. Her lip was split. Her eye was already swelling shut. She was sobbing uncontrollably. "I am teaching you this because I own you," the voice said. Then came the sound that ended it all. The chase in the video grabbed Nia's arm. She tried to pull away. "Don't you walk away from me." There was a snap, a dry, crisp sound like a dead branch breaking in winter. It was the sound of my daughter's radius bone snapping in half. The echo of that snap hung in the auditorium. The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed, no one moved. The horror was total. Then the video froze on the final frame, Nia's broken face staring out at the audience and Chase's reflection visible in the mirror behind her laughing. The screen went black. The lights in the auditorium came up slowly, flooding the room with a harsh, unforgiving brightness. Chase stood alone in the center of the stage. He looked small. He looked naked. He was sweating profusely, the makeup running down his face in dark streaks. He looked out at the audience. He looked for support. He looked for his friends. But there were no friends. The police chief was staring at his shoes, his face pale. The investors were looking at their phones, frantically trying to dump their stock. The mayor was crying openly. Chase stepped toward the microphone. His arrogance was so deep-rooted that even now, even after everyone had seen the truth, he thought he could talk his way out of it. He thought he could spin this. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, his voice shaking. That was clearly a fabrication. "My competitors, they are trying to sabotage the launch. That wasn't me. I would never..." But he stopped. Because he heard it. We all heard it. A low rumble starting from the back of the room. It wasn't applause. It wasn't cheering. It was booing. It started with one person, then 10, then 100. "Liar," someone shouted from the balcony. "Monster," a woman screamed from the front row. Chase stepped back, shielding his eyes from the lights. He looked terrified. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the predator. He was the prey. I sat in the bar, my whiskey forgotten. I watched the empire crumble. I watched the statue topple. I picked up my phone. I dialed Dante. "Did you see it?" I asked, my voice rough with tears. "I saw it," Pop Dante said. "We all saw it. The whole world saw it." On the screen, Chase tried to run. He turned toward the wings of the stage, but his own security team, the men he paid to protect him, stepped aside. They let him pass, but they didn't help him. They looked at him with disgust. The camera followed him as he stumbled off stage. He looked like a man running from a fire, but the fire was inside him. The feed didn't cut. The camera crew, those underpaid workers he had yelled at earlier, kept rolling. They followed him down the hallway. They zoomed in on his shaking hands. They zoomed in on his terror. I took a sip of my drink. It tasted like ash, but it went down smooth. "He wanted to show us his definition of love," I whispered to the empty bar. "Well, now he knows my definition of justice." I stood up. My legs were weak, but my spirit was soaring. I threw a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change," I told the bartender. "Where are you going?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "To finish it," I said. I walked out into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was clear. Chase was running. He was heading home. He was heading back to the scene of the crime to destroy the evidence. He didn't know that I was already one step ahead of him. He didn't know that the house wasn't his sanctuary anymore. It was my trap. And I was going to be there waiting for him when he arrived. The screen behind Chase did not go dark. He was praying for darkness. He was praying for a power outage. He was praying for the world to end right there so he could vanish into the void. But the screen was relentless. It was 60 feet of high-definition truth, and it was just getting warmed up. The video of Nia's torture faded, but it was instantly replaced by something else. A white background, a chat interface. It was a screen recording of an encrypted messaging app, the kind criminals use when they think they are smarter than the law. The audience was still paralyzed by the sound of the bones snapping, but now they were forced to read. The text on the screen was massive. Every letter was 2 feet tall. It was a conversation between a user named Alpha Prime, which was Chase's handle, and a user named Badge1. The date on the chat was from the morning after the assault. Alpha Prime wrote, "I need this to go away. She looks bad. The neighbors might have heard screaming." Badge1 replied, "It is going to cost you. Domestic disturbance with bodily harm is a felony." Chase. Alpha Prime wrote, I don't care about the cost. I have a launch coming up. I need a robbery report. I need a patsy. Can you make it happen? Badge 1 wrote, for $50,000 I can make anything happen. Wire it to the offshore account and get your story straight. The chat log scrolled down. It showed a screenshot of a bank transfer. $50,000 sent to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And then a final message from Badge 1. Done. The report is filed. Intruders unknown. You are in the clear. Pleasure doing business with you. The silence in the auditorium broke. It shattered like a dropped mirror. Chase stood center stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked back at the screen and read the words. He read his own digital fingerprint. Then he looked at the front row. Sitting right there in the VIP seat reserved for local heroes was Sheriff Miller, Badge 1. The sheriff was a big man with a red face and a chest full of medals. He had been nodding along to Chase's speech 5 minutes ago. Now he looked like he was having a heart attack. His face had drained of all color, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. He stared at the screen, then he stared at Chase. The look of betrayal in his eyes was absolute. He realized he hadn't just been exposed, he had been destroyed by the very man who bribed him. Sheriff Miller tried to stand up. He tried to be casual. He grabbed his hat and turned toward the aisle, trying to slip away into the shadows. But the press was there. The reporters had smelled blood. They turned their cameras away from the stage and pointed them directly at the sheriff. It was a wall of flashbulbs, a blinding storm of light. Sheriff Miller, a reporter from CNN, shouted, shoving a microphone into the man's face. Is that your account? Did you take a bribe to cover up a domestic assault, Sheriff? Another reporter yelled, blocking the aisle. Is this why the investigation was closed in 24 hours? Miller tried to push past them. Get out of my face, he growled, but his voice lacked authority. He wasn't the law anymore. He was a suspect. The crowd saw this. The 3,000 people in the audience saw the sheriff trying to run, and that was the spark that ignited the gasoline. They realized it wasn't just one bad man, it was a system. A rich man paid a powerful man to beat a woman and get away with it, and they had been clapping for it. They had been cheering for it. The shame turned to rage instantly. Liar, a voice screamed from the balcony. It was a deep, angry roar. Chase looked up, shielding his eyes. He tried to speak. He leaned into the microphone. Please, everyone listen, there is a reasonable explanation. This is a competitor attack. A water bottle hit him in the chest. It was full. It thudded against his tuxedo with a heavy, wet sound. Chase flinched, backing away. Then a half-eaten apple flew from the middle rows and hit him on the shoulder. Get off the stage, a woman screamed. Her voice was hysterical. You monster. Chase looked left and right. His security team, the Citadel agents, were standing in the wings. They were big men hired to protect him from threats. Chase waved at them frantically. Help me, he screamed at his head of security. Get me out of here! The head of security, the man I had tricked earlier, looked at Chase. He looked at the video of Nia on the screen. He looked at the chat logs proving the sheriff was dirty. The guard reached up and pulled his earpiece out. He dropped it on the floor. He crossed his arms and stared at Chase with cold, dead eyes. He wasn't going to take a bullet for a wife-beater. Not today. Chase was alone. The crowd surged forward. It started as a trickle, then became a wave. People in the front rows jumped the barricades. They weren't coming for autographs. They were coming for blood. Chase realized he couldn't stay on the stage. He was a sitting duck. Panic took over. The cool, calculated CEO vanished, replaced by a terrified animal. He jumped off the front of the stage, trying to push through the press pit to get to the exit. It was a mistake. As soon as his feet hit the floor, the crowd was on him. A hand grabbed his lapel. The expensive midnight blue fabric tore with a loud rip. You think you can buy us? A man shouted, spitting in Chase's face. Chase shoved the man away. Let me go. I will sue you. I will sue all of you. But there were too many of them. Someone grabbed his hair. Someone else poured a soda over his head. The sticky brown liquid ran down his face, ruining his makeup, stinging his eyes. He stumbled. He fell to one knee. For a second, I thought they were going to kill him right there. I watched from the screen in the bar, my knuckles white. I didn't want him dead. Death was too easy. But the mob wasn't trying to kill him. They were stripping him. Someone ripped the bow tie from his neck. Someone else pulled off his shoe. He crawled. The great Chase Caldwell, the visionary, the billionaire, crawled on his hands and knees through the spilled soda and the popcorn trash. He looked up at the cameras, his eyes wide with terror, his hair matted to his skull, his face streaked with dirt and cola. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a beggar. "Get back," he shrieked, kicking out wildly. The reporters were merciless. They didn't help him. They just filmed. They zoomed in on the missing shoe. They zoomed in on the tear in his pants. They broadcast his humiliation to every living room in America. Chase managed to scramble to his feet near the side exit. He pushed a cameraman into a wall, knocking the heavy equipment over. "Out of my way," he screamed. He burst through the double doors into the lobby, leaving the roar of the hate-filled crowd behind him. But the lobby wasn't empty. People were watching on the monitors out there too. When they saw him burst out looking like a deranged lunatic, they didn't offer help. They pulled out their phones. "World Star," some kid shouted, filming Chase as he limped toward the glass doors. Chase ran. He ran out into the cool night air of Atlanta. He had one shoe on. His jacket was gone. His shirt was torn open, revealing his chest. He looked for his limo, but the driver, seeing the chaos on the news, had already driven away. No one wanted to be associated with the fallout. Chase stood on the curb, panting, heaving, looking left and right. I watched it all on the TV in the bar. The helicopter shot showed him looking like a tiny broken insect against the pavement. I put my glass down. The whiskey was finished. The stage was cleared. The bridge was blown. The enemy was in retreat. Chase pulled his phone from his pocket. I knew who he was calling. He was calling his daddy, the judge, or he was calling his lawyer. But no one was going to answer. Dante had seen to that. His accounts were frozen. His contacts were blocked. He had one place left to go. The only place he felt safe, the house, the fortress. He thought he was running to safety. He didn't know he was running to the executioner. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. The pain in my chest was still there, but it felt different now. It wasn't a burden, it was fuel. I walked out of the bar. I didn't need to run. I knew exactly where he was going, and I had the key. The final act wasn't going to be played out in front of millions. It was going to be played out in private, just the two of us, face to face, man to man. I hailed a cab. The driver looked at me warily, but I threw a $100 bill on the seat. "Follow that story," I said, pointing at the news helicopter hovering in the distance. "Take me to Buckhead." The driver nodded. Chase Caldwell was running home, but Daddy was already there waiting in the dark. The back door of the convention center burst open and Chase Caldwell spilled out into the alleyway like a bag of trash thrown from a moving vehicle. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving under the torn remains of his shirt. He was missing a shoe. His $3,000 tuxedo pants were ripped at the knee and stained with the soda and spit of the mob that had turned on him. He wasn't alone. One of the Citadel security agents, a man named Miller who was built like a vending machine, had pushed him out. But Miller didn't look like a protector anymore. He looked at Chase with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Here's your car keys," Miller grunted, tossing the fob at Chase's chest. Chase fumbled to catch them, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped them into a puddle of dirty rainwater. "You are not coming with me," Chase stammered, his eyes wide and wild. "I pay you for protection. Get in the car." Miller shook his head, taking a step back into the shadow of the doorframe. "Contract is over, Mr. Caldwell," Miller said. "My job description covers crowd control and VIP transport. It doesn't cover being an accomplice to a felony. You are on your own." The heavy steel door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the narrow alley. Chase flinched. He was alone. For the first time in his pampered, privileged life, he was completely and utterly alone. He scrambled toward his Porsche Panamera parked in the VIP loading zone. He fumbled with the door handle, scratching the paint with his fingernails. He threw himself into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence inside the car was deafening. It was a hermetically sealed bubble of leather and new car smell, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just escaped. He jammed the key into the ignition and roared the engine to life. He peeled out of the alley, tires screeching against the wet pavement, narrowly missing a dumpster. I watched his progress on the tracking app Dante had installed on his phone. The little blue dot was moving fast, erratic, weaving through downtown traffic. He was driving like a madman. Inside the car, Chase was hyperventilating. He kept wiping his face, smearing the mixture of makeup and grime across his cheeks. He needed a lifeline. He needed a fixer. He pulled his phone out. The screen was cracked. He dialed a number he had memorized since childhood. "Daddy," he whispered. "Pick up. Please, pick up." The phone rang, and rang, and rang. His father was the Honorable Judge William Caldwell. A man who had made a career out of family values and law and order. A man who had bailed Chase out of a DUI in college. A man who had made a sexual harassment lawsuit disappear when Chase was 25. Usually the judge picked up on the first ring. But tonight the phone just rang. "Come on," Chase screamed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "Pick up the phone." The line clicked. Chase's heart leaped. "Dad, listen, I need help. It is a setup. They hacked me. I need you to call the chief of police. I need you to—" He stopped. There was no breathing on the other end, just a robotic, pre-recorded voice. "You have reached the voicemail of Judge William Caldwell. The mailbox is full. Goodbye." The line went dead. Chase stared at the phone. His father hadn't just missed the call. He had sent him straight to voicemail. The mailbox wasn't full. That was a lie. His father was watching the news. His father had seen the video. And his father, the great survivor, had made a calculation. Chase was a cancer. And you cut cancer out to save the body. He has disowned me. Chase whispered, the realization hitting him harder than any punch. He cut me loose. He was driving blind now, tears blurring his vision. He merged onto the highway, cutting off a semi-truck that blasted its horn. Chase didn't care. He needed to get out of the city. He needed to get to the airport. He needed to go to the Cayman Islands where he had stashed his emergency fund. Money. He still had money. As long as he had money, he could survive. He could hire new lawyers. He could buy new friends. He could build a new life in a country that didn't have an extradition treaty. He opened his banking app with a trembling thumb. He needed to transfer the funds from his holding company to his crypto wallet. It was $5 million, enough to disappear forever. The app loaded. The Face ID scan worked, but the dashboard didn't show green numbers. It showed red. Across the top of the screen, a banner flashed in bold letters. Account frozen. Federal seizure order 8842. What? Chase shrieked. He tapped the screen furiously. He tried to access his checking account. Frozen. He tried his savings. Frozen. He tried the secret offshore account he thought no one knew about. Access denied. Dante had done his work. The evidence we released didn't just go to the public. It went to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. It went to the IRS. Dante had flagged the accounts as proceeds of criminal enterprise. Chase stared at the balance, $0. He was driving a $200,000 car, wearing a ruined $3,000 suit, and he didn't have enough money to buy a hamburger. He screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound. He threw the phone at the passenger seat. It bounced off the leather and fell onto the floor mats. He was trapped. The airport was out of the question. He couldn't buy a ticket. His passport would be flagged. He had nowhere to go. And then a thought clawed its way through his panic. The server. The video on the news was a digital copy. But the original files, the master evidence, lived on the physical hard drives in his basement. If the police got those drives, they would have everything. Not just the video of Nia, but the tax evasion, the bribes, the blackmail files he kept on his competitors. But if he destroyed them, if he physically drilled through the platters and melted the slag, he could claim the video on TV was a deepfake. He could claim it was AI generated by a rival company. Without the original raw files to analyze, a good lawyer could create reasonable doubt. It was a long shot. It was a desperate delusional fantasy. But it was all he had left. "I have to burn it," he muttered, his eyes wide and unblinking. "I have to burn it all down." He yanked the steering wheel to the right, swerving across 3 lanes of traffic to catch the exit for Buckhead. He wasn't running away anymore. He was running home. I knew he would come. I was already there. I had taken a cab from the bar while Chase was still getting beaten up in the lobby. I didn't go to the front gate. I knew the codes were changed, or the police might be on their way. I went to the back through the woods that bordered the property. I moved slowly. The morphine I had refused to take was calling my name, but I ignored it. The pain was my compass. I entered the house through the same side door I had used before. It was still unlocked. Chase's arrogance was consistent to the end. The house was dark. The smart lights were off. The only illumination came from the street lights filtering through the massive windows, casting long skeletal shadows across the white furniture. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. I didn't hide in the closet. I didn't hide behind the curtains. I walked into his home office, the room where he counted his money, the room where he planned his empire. There was a large leather executive chair behind the mahogany desk. It looked like a throne. I sat in it. It was comfortable. Too comfortable. It swallowed my thin, cancer-ridden frame. I swiveled the chair so I was facing the door. I reached into my waistband and pulled out the M1911. I placed it on the desk. The heavy steel made a solid thunk sound against the wood. I wasn't going to shoot him. Not unless I had to. The gun wasn't for murder. It was for authority. It was the gavel. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then I heard it. The roar of an engine coming up the driveway. He was driving fast. I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. I heard the car door slam. He didn't use the key. He kicked the front door open. I heard him running through the hallway. He was panting, sobbing, muttering to himself. "Where's the drill? Where's the gasoline? I need a lighter." He was frantic. He sounded like a cornered animal. He ran past the office toward the basement door. He was going straight for the server room. I let him pass. I let him run down the stairs. I stood up. I picked up the gun. I walked silently to the top of the basement stairs. I heard him down there. I heard the sound of metal crashing. He was throwing things. He was looking for the server tower, but the tower wasn't there. I heard the silence fall. The confused, terrifying silence of a man realizing his prize is missing. "No," Chase whispered. His voice drifted up the stairs. "No, no, no, where is it?" He ran back up the stairs. He was going to check the office. He probably thought he had moved it. He burst into the office, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. And then he saw me. I was sitting back in the chair. The moonlight caught the side of my face. It caught the barrel of the gun resting on the desk. Chase froze. He stopped so fast he almost fell over. He grabbed the doorframe for support. He looked at me. He looked at the gun. He looked at the empty spot on the floor where his server used to be. "You..." He gasped. "Hello, Chase," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who has finished his work. "You are looking for your hard drives, I assume?" Chase stared at me, his mouth hanging open. He looked at my dirty jumpsuit. He looked at the blood on my lip. "You stole it," he whispered. "You stole everything." "I didn't steal it," I corrected him. "I just liberated the truth." Chase's face twisted. The fear was replaced by a sudden jagged rage. He saw an old dying man. He didn't see a soldier. He saw a nuisance. "Give it back!" he screamed, taking a step toward me. I didn't flinch. I just tapped the barrel of the gun with my index finger. "Sit down, Chase," I said. He stopped. He looked at the gun again. "You won't shoot me," he sneered, though his voice wavered. "You are too self-righteous. You want me to go to jail. You won't kill me." "You are right," I said. "I don't want to kill you." I leaned forward. "But I am dying, Chase. I have about 60 days left on this earth. And the thing about dying men is, we don't have to worry about life in prison." I raised the gun and pointed it directly at his chest. "So if you take one more step, I will blow a hole in you the size of a grapefruit, and I will sleep like a baby tonight." Chase froze. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't hate, it was certainty. He collapsed into the chair opposite the desk. He slumped down, defeated. "Why?" he sobbed. "Why did you have to ruin everything? It was just a marriage. It was just a disagreement." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had treated my daughter like property. "It wasn't a marriage, Chase," I said. "It was a hostage situation, and the rescue team has arrived." Sirens. Faint at first, then louder, rising and falling like a banshee's wail. Chase's head snapped up. He looked at the window. Blue and red lights were flashing through the trees, getting closer. "You called them?" he asked, his voice trembling. I shook my head. I didn't have to. The whole country called them Chase. I stood up. "Your carriage awaits Cinderella, but I don't think you are going to the ball." The tires screeched to a halt outside. Car doors slammed. Voices shouted, "FBI, open up." I looked at Chase one last time. "Stand up," I commanded. "Walk out there and die like a man, or at least try to fake it." Chase stood up. He was shaking uncontrollably. He walked toward the front door, his head hanging low. I stayed in the shadows of the office. I wanted to watch. I wanted to see the end of the movie I had directed. Chào bạn tôi là Dung Chuyên Đàn ông. Đây là phần 13 cuộc đối thoại của hai người đàn ông. Trong phần này tôi tập trung khắc họa sự đối lập cực độ. Một bên là Chase, trẻ dâu nhưng hoang loạn và hèn nhát. Một bên là Silas, già bệnh tật nhưng bình tĩnh và nắm quyền kiểm soát tuyệt đối. Không khí trong phòng phải nghẹt thở giống như một phiên tòa mà thẩm phán là một người lính già sắp chết. Dưới đây là kịch bản chi tiết bằng tiếng Anh được tối ưu cho giọng đọc voiceover. The leather of the executive chair was soft beneath me. It was imported Italian hide smelling of money and pretension. I sat there in the darkness of the home office, a ghost in dirty coveralls holding a piece of cold steel that was older than the man who owned this house. My heavy breathing was the only sound in the room. The cancer was tightening its grip on my lungs, squeezing every breath like a vice, but I welcomed the pain. It kept me awake. It kept me sharp. The M1911 pistol in my hand felt familiar. It was the same weapon I had carried in Vietnam, the same weapon I had cleaned every Sunday for 40 years. It was heavy, scarred, and ugly, just like me. I heard him before I saw him. The front door downstairs crashed open, splintering against the wall. Chase didn't walk into his house, he invaded it. I heard his footsteps, frantic and uneven, sprinting across the marble foyer. He was muttering to himself, a stream of curses and panicked prayers. He was a rat looking for a hole. He ran past the stairs toward the basement first. I listened to the sounds of him tearing the house apart. I heard the crash of metal, the shattering of glass. He was looking for the server tower. He was looking for the only thing that could save him. When he realized the basement was empty, a howl of rage echoed up the ventilation shafts. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. Then came the silence, the terrifying realization. He knew there was only one other place the drive could be. I heard him running up the stairs. He was gasping for air, his lungs unaccustomed to the exertion of terror. He burst into the hallway, his footsteps pounding on the hardwood. He kicked the door to the office open. "Where is it?" he screamed, his eyes wild, scanning the room. "Where is the drive?" He didn't see me at first. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He rushed to the desk, ripping open drawers, throwing papers and expensive pens onto the floor. He was looking for a backup. A flash drive. Anything. I cleared my throat. The sound was small, but in that silence it sounded like a thunderclap. Chase spun around. I swiveled the chair slowly so I was facing him. The moonlight hit the side of my face, illuminating the grime, the blood on my lip, and the cold, dead look in my eyes. It also illuminated the gun resting on my knee. Chase froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me like I was a hallucination. "You," he whispered. "Hello, Chase," I said. My voice was rough, scratching against my throat like sandpaper. "You are home early. The party didn't go well, I take it." Chase stared at the gun. Then he looked at my face. The shock quickly morphed into something else. Rage. Blind, stupid arrogance. He saw an old man, a sick man, a man he had bullied in the hospital just that morning. He didn't see the soldier. He only saw the victim. "You stole it," he hissed, taking a step forward. "You stole my property. Give it back, old man. Give it back right now, or I swear to God." He lunged. It was a pathetic attempt. He wasn't a fighter. He was a man who paid other people to do his fighting. He rushed at me, his hands reaching for my throat, his face twisted in a mask of hate. I didn't stand up. I didn't shout. I simply raised the M1911. I pointed the dark barrel directly at the center of his chest. I pulled the hammer back. Click. That sound stopped him dead. Chase skidded to a halt, his expensive Italian loafers sliding on the rug. He was 3 feet away, close enough to smell the sweat and the stale soda on his clothes, close enough to see the dilated pupils of his eyes. He looked down the barrel of the gun. It wasn't a modern plastic pistol. It was a cannon, and he knew that at this range I couldn't miss. "Sit down, Chase," I commanded. He hesitated. His chest was heaving. I said, "Sit down." He collapsed into the guest chair opposite the desk. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. He began to sob. It wasn't a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a man who had lost his toys. Why, he wailed, looking up at me through his fingers. "Why are you doing this to me? I gave Naya everything. I gave her this house. I gave her a life most women would kill for. And this is how you repay me? You ruin me." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I tried to find a shred of humanity in his face. I tried to find the man my daughter had fallen in love with. But there was nothing there. Just a hollow shell painted with greed. "You didn't give her a life, Chase," I said quietly. "You took her life. You turned her into a prop, a doll in your playhouse. And when she stopped smiling on cue, you broke her. She disobeyed me. Chase shouted, hitting the armrest. She humiliated me. I had to teach her respect. I tightened my grip on the gun. The urge to pull the trigger was overwhelming. It would be so easy. Just 3 pounds of pressure and the world would be rid of him. My finger twitched on the trigger guard. But then I remembered Dante's words. If you kill him, he wins. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down. I reached into my jacket pocket with my free hand. I didn't pull out the drive. I pulled out a manila folder. It was thick. It contained the printouts of the chat logs, the bank transfers, and the medical reports from the last 3 years, the evidence of his systematic torture. I threw the folder onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of him. "Read it," I said. Chase looked at the folder. He didn't touch it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "That is your legacy," I said. "That is the story of Chase Caldwell. It is not the story of a visionary. It is the story of a coward who pays cops to hide his crimes. It is the story of a fraud who steals from his investors. And tonight, it is the #1 downloaded file in America." Chase stared at the folder. He realized then that the server didn't matter anymore. The genie was out of the bottle. He looked up at me. His eyes were red and wet. "You are going to kill me, aren't you?" he whispered. "That is why you are here, to execute me." He straightened up slightly, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "Go ahead," he said, closing his eyes. "Do it. Make me a martyr. If you shoot me, I die a victim. The media will turn on you. They will say you were a crazy old man with PTSD. My legacy will survive." He was right, and he knew it. He was daring me. He wanted the easy way out. He didn't want to face the music. I lowered the gun. I let out a long, wheezing laugh. It rattled in my chest like loose gravel. Chase opened his eyes, confused. "I am not going to kill you, son," I said. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking. "I am dying, Chase. The doctor gave me 2 months, maybe less after tonight. I can feel my lungs shutting down. I am a dead man walking." I pointed the gun at him again, not to shoot, but to emphasize my point. "And dead men don't care about justice. But living men have to pay their debts." I stood up slowly, fighting the gravity that tried to pull me down. I walked around the desk until I was standing right next to him. He flinched, expecting a blow. I leaned down close to his ear. I could smell the fear coming off him in waves. "I don't need to kill you," I whispered, "because death is peace, and you don't deserve peace." I tapped the folder on the desk. "You are going to live, Chase. You are going to live for a long, long time. But not in this house, not in this neighborhood. You are going to prison," I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. "And not a white-collar resort. With these charges, with the assault, with the bribery, you are going to maximum security." I saw him shiver. "And do you know who lives in maximum security, Chase?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. "The men you called animals, the men you called thugs, the men you mocked in your private chat rooms, the men whose neighborhoods you refused to hire from." I smiled a cold, humorless smile. "You are going to be locked in a cage with them for 20 years. You are going to be the minority. You are going to be the weak one. You are going to be the one who has to learn respect." Chase's face went pale. He understood. For a narcissist like him, the loss of status was worse than death. The loss of control was his true hell. I stood up straight and holstered the gun. "Good luck, Chase," I said. "You are going to need it." I walked toward the door. Chase sat there frozen. He looked at the folder. He looked at the empty space where his server used to be. "Wait!" he cried out. "Wait! Silas, please! We can make a deal. I have money. I have crypto. I can transfer it to you. Just help me get out of the country." I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. "Your accounts are frozen," I said. "You are broke, Chase. You are poorer than I ever was." I stepped out into the hallway, and then I heard it. The sound I had been waiting for. Sirens. Not one, not two, but a chorus of them, approaching fast, screaming through the night. I walked to the front door and opened it. The front lawn was bathed in blue and red flashing lights. The FBI had arrived. I looked back at the office. Chase was still sitting in the chair staring at the wall. He wasn't moving. He was already dead. His body was just waiting to catch up. I walked out onto the porch and raised my empty hands. The cool night air filled my burning lungs. It was over. The demolition was complete. The structure had fallen, and I was still standing. The blue and red lights flashing through the bay windows were not the lazy rotating lights of a local patrol car. These were strobe lights. Intense, blinding, urgent. They cut through the darkness of the living room like strobe lights in a nightclub from hell. I could hear the heavy thrum of a helicopter hovering overhead, shaking the crystal chandelier in the foyer. The wind from the rotors whipped the manicured shrubs against the glass. This was not a courtesy call. This was a siege. I stood on the threshold of the office watching Chase. He was still frozen near the desk, staring at the empty space where his server used to be. The arrogance that had defined his entire existence was evaporating off him like steam. He looked small. He looked fragile. He looked like what he really was, a terrified child who had broken a toy and was waiting for the punishment. "They are here," I said, my voice barely audible over the noise outside. Chase snapped his head toward the front door. He took a step back. "No," he whispered. "No. I can fix this. I just need to talk to them. I just need to explain." He smoothed his torn shirt. He ran a hand through his messy hair, trying to compose himself, trying to summon the CEO persona that had protected him for so long. "I will tell them it was a misunderstanding," he muttered, his eyes darting around the room. "I will tell them you are senile. I will tell them you have a weapon. Yes, that is it. You are the threat." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are the intruder, Silas. You broke in. You threatened me." I didn't answer. I just watched. The front door didn't open. It exploded. There was a deafening boom as a battering ram hit the solid mahogany wood. Splinters flew into the hallway. The expensive lock, the smart security system, the reinforced hinges, they all gave way instantly. The door crashed inward, and the hallway was suddenly filled with men. They weren't wearing the beige uniforms of the sheriff's department. They were wearing navy blue windbreakers with bright yellow letters on the back. FBI. They wore helmets and tactical vests. They carried automatic rifles held tight against their chests. "Federal agents, get on the ground. Now." The shout was a wall of sound. It wasn't a request. It was a command backed by the full force of the United States government. Chase screamed. It was a high-pitched sound of pure panic. "Don't shoot. I am Chase Caldwell. This is my house." He ran out of the office into the hallway, his hands raised, but not in surrender. He was waving them, trying to get their attention, trying to order them to stop. "He is in there," Chase shouted, pointing back at me. "The crazy old man. He has a gun. He kidnapped me." But the agents didn't look at me. They had seen the video. They knew who the target was. They knew who the monster was. "Get down," the lead agent roared. Chase didn't get down. His ego wouldn't let him. He still thought he was the most powerful man in the room. He still thought he could negotiate. "I am the victim here," Chase yelled, stepping toward the agents. "Do you know who my father is? I demand to speak to your superior. You are making a huge mistake. That was the last mistake he ever made as a free man." 3 agents moved as one. It was a wave of kinetic energy. The first agent hit Chase with a ballistic shield, knocking the wind out of him. Chase flew backward, his feet leaving the ground. He hit the wall hard, the drywall cracking under the impact. Before he could slide down, the second agent grabbed his arm and spun him around. I heard the sound of a shoulder being wrenched. Chase howled in pain. They slammed him face first onto the floor. It was the Persian rug, the antique silk rug that Nia was terrified of stepping on with shoes because Chase would yell at her. Now his face was being ground into it. "Hands behind your back. Stop resisting. I am not resisting." Chase shrieked, his voice muffled by the carpet. "I am the victim. Get off me. You are hurting me." The agents were professionals. They didn't care about his complaints. They pulled his arms back with a force that made him sob. I heard the ratcheting sound of the handcuffs tightening. Click, click, click. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, better than any symphony. I stood in the doorway of the office, leaning against the frame. My chest was burning the cancer, reminding me that my time was short. But I stood tall. I held my empty hands up slowly, showing the agents I was not a threat. One agent, a younger man with intense eyes, trained his rifle on me. "Drop the weapon," he shouted, seeing the M1911 on the desk behind me. "It is on the desk," I said calmly. "I am unarmed. I am Silas Mercer. I am the one who called you." The lead agent looked up from where he was pinning Chase to the floor. He saw my face. He recognized me from the hospital records. He lowered his weapon slightly. "Clear the room," he ordered. "Secure the suspect. Medical is on the way for the old man." They hauled Chase to his feet, but his legs wouldn't work. He went limp dead weight. They had to drag him. His face was a mask of snot and tears and dust. The expensive tuxedo pants were twisted. The shoes were gone. He looked at me as they dragged him past the office door. "Silas," he screamed. Tell them I didn't mean it. Tell them I love her." I looked at him. I stepped out of the office. Chase was blocking the hallway, writhing in the grip of the agents. I didn't walk around him. I walked right up to him. The agents paused, sensing the moment. They held him there on his knees. Chase looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Dad, please." I didn't say a word. I didn't spit on him. I didn't kick him. I simply stepped over him. I lifted my heavy work boot and stepped over his shoulder like he was a piece of trash on the sidewalk. I didn't look down. I kept my eyes fixed on the open front door where the cool night air was waiting. "You are nothing," I whispered as I passed him. Chase collapsed into a fresh wave of sobbing, screaming about entrapment and lawsuits. "I am innocent. It was AI. It was a deepfake. I am a good man." No one listened. The agent shoved him forward, pushing him toward the door. I walked out onto the porch. The scene outside was chaotic. There were police cars blocking the entire street. The neighbors were out on their lawns in their bathrobes, holding their phones filming. The news helicopters were circling their spotlights, cutting through the trees. I saw the local police, the ones who had protected him, the ones who had taken his bribes. They were relegated to the perimeter, pushing back the press. They looked scared. They knew the FBI was going to come for them next. I saw Dante standing by his van across the street. He was wearing a hoodie, his hands in his pockets. He saw me come out. He didn't wave. He just nodded once. A slow, respectful nod. I nodded back. An EMT rushed up to me carrying a medical bag. "Sir, are you injured? We have an ambulance ready for the suspect, but you look like you need help." I leaned against a pillar of the massive porch. The house looked beautiful from the outside, a perfect white mansion, but inside it was rotting. "I am fine, son," I wheezed. "I am just tired." Chase was brought out a moment later. The press erupted. Flashbulbs popped like lightning. "Mr. Caldwell, did you break her arm?" "Chase, is it true you bribed the sheriff?" Chase tried to hide his face, but his hands were cuffed behind his back. He had nowhere to hide. The whole world saw him. The whole world saw the monster in the torn tuxedo. They shoved him into the back of a black SUV, not a limousine, a cage on wheels. The door slammed shut. I watched the SUV drive away, its sirens wailing. It disappeared down the winding road, taking my daughter's nightmare with it. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like rain and pine needles. It tasted like freedom. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to a lawyer, not to the police. I called the hospital. "Nurse," I said when she answered. "This is Silas. Mr. Mercer." She sounded excited. "Did you see the news?" "It is everywhere. I saw it," I said softly. "How is she?" "She is stable," the nurse said. "Her vitals improved about 10 minutes ago. It is like she knew he was gone." I closed my eyes and let a tear roll down my cheek. "Tell her I am coming," I said. "Tell her the house is clean." I hung up the phone. I walked down the steps of the mansion, leaving the gun on the desk, leaving the millions of dollars of art and furniture behind. I didn't need any of it. I was a combat engineer. My job was to clear the path. And the path was finally clear. The sound of a knife slicing through the skin of a red apple is a distinct rhythmic noise. Shk, shk, shk. It was the only sound in the private recovery room on the 4th floor of St. Mary's Hospital. I sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair by the window, watching the ribbon of red peel fall into the small trash can. My hands were shaking. Not from fear this time, but from the exhaustion so deep it felt like it had settled in the marrow of my bones. It had been 14 days, 2 weeks of sitting in this chair watching the slow rise and fall of my daughter's chest. 2 weeks of listening to the beep of the monitors and the hushed whispers of nurses who looked at me with a mixture of reverence and pity. The cancer was moving faster now. I could feel it taking territory in my lungs like an invading army that knew the war was already won. I had lost 15 pounds. My old leather jacket hung off my shoulders like a shroud. But I wasn't leaving. I wasn't going to die until I saw her eyes open. I had one last status report to deliver. The morning sun was cutting through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the bed. And then the rhythm of her breathing changed. It hitched. A small, sharp gasp. I stopped peeling the apple. I leaned forward, my joints protesting with a dry crack. "Nia," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, swollen, still purple from the bruising, but the swelling had gone down enough to see the shape of the face I had loved since the day she was born. She groaned a low sound of confusion and pain. Her hand, the one that wasn't in a cast, twitched on the white sheet. She was reaching for something, or she was pushing something away. She opened her eyes. They were unfocused at first, roaming the ceiling, trying to make sense of the white tiles. Then they snapped to the side. They found me. But she didn't see her father. In that split second of waking nightmare, she saw a man. And in her world, men were dangerous. She gasped violently, scrambling backward against the pillows, her monitor spiking into a frantic alarm. She threw her hands up to cover her face, a reflex born of months of torture. "No," she screamed, her voice raspy and weak. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't hit me." The terror in her voice hit me harder than any bullet I had ever taken in the field. It broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. She was awake, but she was still in the prison he had built in her mind. I stood up slowly, showing my empty hands. I didn't rush her. I didn't touch her. I stood there letting her see my face, letting her see the tears running down my hollow cheeks. "Nia," I said softly, "it is me. It is Dad. Look at me, baby girl. Look at my hands. No fists." She froze, peeking through her fingers. She was trembling so hard the bed frame rattled. She blinked, clearing the fog of sedation and fear. She looked at my gray hair. She looked at the apple in my hand. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was small, broken. "I am here," I said, taking a half step closer. "I am right here. You are safe." She lowered her hands slowly. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the corners, looking for the cameras, looking for the shadow of the monster. "Where is he?" she asked. The question wasn't if he was coming back, it was when. "Where is Chase? Is he outside? Did he send you?" I sat down on the edge of the bed. I took her hand. Her skin was cool and she flinched at my touch before relaxing into it. "Chase is not outside," I said, my voice dropping to that low, steady tone I used to use when I read her bedtime stories. "Chase is gone, Nia." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "No, you don't understand. He is powerful. He knows people. He said if I ever left, he would find me. He said he owns the police." I squeezed her hand. "He doesn't own anything anymore," I said. I reached for the remote control on the bedside table. I hesitated for a second, wondering if it was too soon. But she needed to know. She needed to see the body of the dragon to know it was truly dead. I turned on the TV. It was tuned to CNN. I didn't have to wait long. The story was still dominating the news cycle. "Look," I said, pointing at the screen. Nia looked. On the screen was footage of a man in an orange jumpsuit being led into a courthouse. He was handcuffed, his ankles shackled. His head was shaved. He looked thin, pale, and terrified. He was surrounded by a mob of angry protesters holding signs that said "Justice for Nia" and "End the Silence." Nia gasped, covering her mouth. Is that him?" "That is inmate number 8940, I said. "The FBI raided the house 2 weeks ago. They found everything, Nia. The server, the videos, the bribes. The sheriff is in the cell next to him. Chase was denied bail. The judge called him a danger to society." I looked at her. "The whole world saw what he did," I said. "We played the video, Nia. At his presentation, everyone saw the truth. You aren't the crazy wife anymore. You are the survivor, and he is the most hated man in America." Nia stared at the screen, mesmerized. She watched the man who had controlled her every breath being shoved into a police van like a common criminal. She watched him cower from the cameras. "He can't hurt me," she asked. He will never hurt anyone again, I promised. He is going to die in a cage. She closed her eyes and a sob broke from her chest. It wasn't a sob of fear. It was the sound of a dam breaking. It was relief, pure, overwhelming relief. I pulled her into my arms. I held her while she cried, soaking my old t-shirt with her tears. I held her until my own arms ached, until the sun moved across the floor. After a long time, there was a knock on the door. Nia tensed, but I rubbed her back. "It is okay," I said. "It is the good guys." The door opened and a man in a sharp gray suit walked in. He was carrying a leather briefcase. It was Mr. Sterling, the lawyer Dante had recommended. He was a shark, but he was our shark. "Mr. Sterling," I said, standing up. "Come in." Sterling nodded at me, then looked at Nia with genuine kindness. "Mrs. Caldwell, or should I say Ms. Mercer," he said, bowing his head slightly. "I am glad to see you awake. I am sorry to intrude, but I have some news that I thought might help with your recovery." Nia wiped her eyes, sitting up straighter. "Who are you?" "I am your attorney," Sterling said, placing the briefcase on the rolling table. "I have been working with your father and a young man named Dante to secure your assets." "My assets?" Nia asked. "I don't have anything. Chase controlled all the accounts. He made me sign a prenup. I don't even have a credit card." Sterling smiled. It was a vicious, satisfied smile. "The prenup is void," Sterling said, opening a folder. "There is a clause in state law called the Slayer Rule and another regarding proceeds of crime. Because Chase used his abuse of you to market his app, and because his wealth was maintained through criminal bribery, the court has granted an emergency injunction." He pulled out a document stamped with a heavy judicial seal. "We sued him civilly on your behalf the morning after his arrest," Sterling explained. "Since his assets were frozen and he is facing life in prison, he chose to settle the civil suit to avoid the death penalty on the federal kidnapping charges." Sterling pushed the paper toward her. "He signed it yesterday from his cell." Nia looked at the paper. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means Sterling said that Chase Caldwell is bankrupt. The house in Buckhead is yours. The cars are yours. The patent for the software is yours. And the $5 million he tried to hide in the Cayman Islands, that is yours too. It is restitution for pain and suffering." Nia looked at me, her eyes wide. "Dad," I nodded. "It is true, baby girl. You are a rich woman. You can sell that house. You can burn it down. You can do whatever you want." Nia picked up the paper. Her hands were trembling again, but this time it was with a sense of power. She wasn't a victim asking for permission. She was the owner. "I don't want the house," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I never want to step foot in there again. Sell it. Sell everything." Sterling nodded, making a note. "Done. We will liquidate the estate by the end of the month." Nia looked at me. "And the money?" she asked. I smiled. "The money is for your future, Nia. For the life you didn't get to live." She shook her head. "No, I don't want his blood money." "Then use it to help others," I said. "Build something. Build a shelter. Build a place where women like you can go when they have nowhere else. Make his money do the good he never did." Nia looked out the window at the bright blue sky. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking at a wall. She was looking at a horizon. "I like that," she whispered. "The Silas Mercer Foundation." I chuckled a wet, rattling sound. "No, not my name. Your name. This is your victory." Sterling packed up his papers. "I will let you two talk. You have a lot of planning to do." He left the room, closing the door softly. I sat back down in the chair. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last 2 weeks was fading fast. I felt cold, my vision blurred slightly at the edges. Dad, Nia asked, looking at me with concern. You look so tired." "I am fine," I lied. "Just an old soldier resting after the battle." She reached out and touched my face. Her fingers traced the lines of my jaw. "You saved me," she said. "You came back for me." I kissed her hand. "I would cross hell for you, Nia. I blew up the bridge. The enemy is gone." She smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now," I said, leaning my head back against the chair, closing my eyes. "Now we heal. You live your life. You find happiness. You forget his name." And me, I thought, I just need to hold on a little longer. Just a few more days. I need to see her walk out of this hospital. I need to see her stand in the sunlight on her own 2 feet. Then I can go. I squeezed her hand one last time. "We are free, baby girl," I whispered. "We are finally free." The room was quiet again, just the sound of our breathing and the steady, reassuring beep of the heart monitor proving that despite everything we were still here. The monster was in a cage, and my daughter was safe. Mission accomplished. The human body is a stubborn machine, but it knows when the contract is up. For the last month, I had been running on pure hate and high-grade morphine. I had been a demolition expert, keeping the building standing just long enough to plant the charges. But now the charges had blown. The dust had settled. The enemy was destroyed. And the structural integrity of Silas Mercer was finally giving way. I didn't collapse in a dramatic fashion. I didn't fall down a flight of stairs. I simply sat down in the chair next to Nia's bed after the lawyer left, and I couldn't get back up. My legs, which had carried me through rice paddies in Vietnam and through the ventilation shafts of a convention center, just decided they were done. The nurses came. They put me on a gurney. They wheeled me into a room 2 doors down from my daughter. And there I stayed. The decline was fast. The doctor said the stress of the last few days had accelerated the cancer. It had spread from my lungs to my bones. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. But I didn't mind. The pain was just a reminder that I was still paying the bill, and I was happy to pay it. For the next 3 days, the roles reversed. Nia was the one sitting in the chair. She was still wearing a cast on her arm, and the bruises on her face were turning a sickly shade of yellow and green, but she looked beautiful. She looked like her mother. She fed me ice chips. She held my hand when the coughing fits shook the bed frame. She read to me from the books I used to read to her when she was a child. On the 4th night, I woke up. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlights outside. The hospital was quiet. I knew this was it. You don't need a medical degree to know when the Reaper is standing in the corner of the room checking his watch. The air feels different. Thin. Cold. Nia was asleep in the chair, her head resting on the side of my mattress. She looked peaceful. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she was waiting for a blow to land. I reached out and touched her hair. My hand was trembling and my skin looked like parchment paper wrapped around bone. "Nia," I whispered. She woke up instantly, the reflex of a survivor. But when she saw it was me, her eyes softened. "Dad, do you need the nurse? Do you need more pain meds?" I shook my head. The movement made the room spin. "No, baby girl, no more meds. I need you to do something for me." She stood up and leaned over me, her face full of concern. "Anything, Dad. Anything." I pointed a shaking finger toward the closet where they had hung my old leather jacket. "My jacket," I wheezed. "Inside pocket. The big one." Nia went to the closet. She fumbled with the heavy leather. She pulled out a rolled-up tube of paper secured with a rubber band. It was old. The edges were frayed and yellowed. She brought it to the bed. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," I said. She pulled off the rubber band and unrolled the paper on the blanket covering my legs. It was a blueprint. A hand-drawn architectural draft. The lines were precise, drawn with the steady hand of a younger man. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a fortress of glass and steel like the prison Chase had built. It was a house. A real house. It had a wraparound porch. It had a big kitchen with a window facing the garden. It had a workshop in the back. "I drew this 20 years ago," I said, my voice barely a rasp. "Your mother and we used to talk about it. We bought a plot of land down in Savannah, near the water. We were going to build it when I retired." I stopped to cough, the sound wet and terrible. Nia held a cup of water to my lips. I took a sip and continued. "But then she got sick, and the money went to doctors, and then she died. And I just put the plans away. I couldn't build it alone. A house without her was just a pile of wood." Nia looked at the drawing, tears streaming down her face. She traced the lines of the master bedroom. "It is beautiful, Dad. Mom would have loved the porch." I reached out and covered her hand with mine. "It is yours now, Nia. The land is still there. I paid the property taxes every year. It is in the trust." I looked her in the eye, summoning the last of my strength. "I want you to build it. Don't sell it. Build it." "But Dad," she started. "Listen to me," I interrupted. "You can't stay in Atlanta. You can't stay in that White House Chase bought. That place is cursed. It is full of ghosts and cameras. You need to start over. You need to go somewhere where the air is salt and the ground is soft." I tapped the paper. "Build this house. Build it for yourself. Build it for the children you might have one day. Build it because you deserve a home that was made with love, not money. Nia nodded, sobbing quietly. I will build it, I promise. I will paint the kitchen yellow just like Mom wanted. I smiled. Yellow. Ruth always loved yellow. That is good, I whispered. That is good. I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids was warm. The pain was starting to fade, replaced by a numbness that started in my toes and worked its way up. It felt like sinking into a warm bath after a long, hard shift. Dad Nia's voice sounded far away. Dad, stay with me. Please. I am not going far, baby girl, I murmured. I am just clocking out. I thought about Chase sitting in his cell. I thought about the terror in his eyes when the FBI broke down the door. I thought about the chat logs being read on the news. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I just felt satisfaction. The kind of satisfaction you feel when you finish a job. The structure was unsound, so I brought it down. The site was cleared. Now the new construction could begin. Nia, I said, my voice fading to a whisper. Yes, Dad. You are strong. Never forget that. You survived him. You survived the war. I gripped her hand one last time. He is gone. The trash is taken out. The world is clean again. I felt her squeeze my hand back. I love you, Dad. I love you so much. I wanted to say it back. I wanted to tell her she was the best thing I ever made, better than any bridge, better than any building. But my voice was gone. The air in my lungs was gone. I opened my eyes one last time. I looked at her, and then I looked past her. The room seemed to get brighter, not the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital, but a soft golden light. The kind of light you see on a summer evening in Savannah, and in that light I saw her. Ruth. She was wearing her yellow sundress. She looked young. She looked happy. She was standing in the doorway waiting for me. She held out her hand. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. The pain was gone. The weight of the gun was gone. The cancer was gone. I let go of Nia's hand. I took Ruth's hand. And I walked out of the room, leaving the broken body behind, leaving the war behind. I was finally going home. The smell of the ocean mixed with the scent of fresh pine and sawdust is the first thing that hits you when you walk up the driveway. It is a clean smell, a smell of new beginnings. It is exactly the smell Silas Mercer dreamed of when he sat in that hospital chair drawing lines on a piece of yellowed paper. 1 year has passed since the demolition. 1 year since the old soldier laid down his weapon and went home to his wife. And in that year, the blueprint didn't just stay on paper. It rose from the earth. The house stands on a bluff overlooking the Savannah River. It has a wraparound porch just like Ruth wanted. It has a kitchen painted the color of morning sunshine. But it isn't just a home for one woman. It is a sanctuary for many. Above the front door, a modest wooden sign hangs swaying gently in the coastal breeze. It reads the Silas House. Nia stands on the porch steps. She looks different. The cast is long gone. The bruises have faded into memories. But the biggest change is in her eyes. The fear that used to live there, the frantic searching for an exit, is gone. It has been replaced by a quiet, unshakable strength. She is wearing a yellow dress today, a tribute to her mother, a tribute to the light. A crowd has gathered on the lawn. But this isn't like the crowd at the convention center. There are no flash bulbs. There are no tech investors looking for a profit. These are women with scars visible and invisible. Women who had nowhere else to go until Nia used the millions of dollars of blood money to build them a fortress. Nia steps up to the microphone. Her hand is steady. My father was a combat engineer, she says, her voice carrying over the sound of the wind in the trees. He taught me that sometimes you have to destroy a structure to save the people inside. He taught me that love isn't about control. It is about liberation. She looks out at the faces of the women she is helping. This house was built on the foundation of his love. It is a place where no one will ever hurt you again. It is a place where you can breathe. She picks up a pair of heavy scissors. She cuts the yellow ribbon stretched across the stairs. The crowd cheers. It is a sound of pure joy, a sound of healing. But 300 miles away, in a place where the sun never fully reaches the floor, there is no cheering. There is only the sound of metal slamming against metal. State Penitentiary Maximum Security Unit, Block D. The cell is 6 feet by 8 feet. It smells of bleach, unwashed bodies, and despair. In the corner of the cell, sitting on a thin mattress, is inmate 894 Chase Caldwell. He doesn't look like a CEO anymore. He doesn't look like a visionary. His head is shaved to prevent lice. His skin is pasty gray from a lack of sunlight. He has lost 30 pounds. The arrogant smile that once graced magazine covers is gone, replaced by a permanent flinch. He is reading a letter. It is a rejection letter from his appeal lawyer. No grounds for appeal. The evidence is irrefutable. The cell door buzzes. It slides open. It isn't dinner time. It is yard time, the most dangerous hour of the day. Chase stands up. He keeps his head down. He tries to make himself small. He has learned the hard way that eye contact is a challenge. He walks out into the common area. He tries to stick to the wall. He tries to be invisible. But in here, he is famous. The video of him beating his wife is legendary even among criminals. They don't like wife beaters in here. They have a code. And Chase broke it. "Hey, Hollywood," a voice calls out. Chase freezes. He knows that voice. It belongs to a man named Marcus, serving life for armed robbery. Marcus is big. Marcus is the law in Block D. Chase tries to keep walking. "I am talking to you." "Hollywood," Marcus says, stepping into Chase's path. Chase stops. He looks up terrified. I didn't say anything, Marcus. I am just walking." Marcus smiles. It is a smile that reminds Chase of the smile he used to give Nia right before he hit her. "You need to learn some respect," Marcus says. "You need some discipline. Isn't that what you called it?" Discipline. Chase backs away. "Please, I have money. I can get you money." Marcus laughs. "Your money is gone, Hollywood. You are broke. You are nobody." Marcus nods to the two men behind him. "Teach him the lesson," Marcus says. Chase screams, but no one comes to help. The guards turn their backs. It is the same silence Chase used to inflict on his victims. The circle closes in. Back in Savannah, the sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The guests have gone inside to eat dinner in the big yellow kitchen. Nia remains on the porch alone. She walks to the edge of the railing and looks up at the first star appearing in the twilight. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small, worn object. It is an old dog tag. Silas Mercer, U.S. Army. She rubs her thumb over the raised letters. The wind chimes on the porch tinkle softly, a gentle melodic sound that feels like a conversation. She closes her eyes and smiles. "Thank you, Dad," she whispers to the wind. She puts the tag back in her pocket and turns to go inside. The screen door slams shut behind her. The house is warm, the house is safe, and the night is finally peaceful. We often mistake silence for weakness and patience for submission. But in a world loud with lies, the quietest man in the room is usually the one watching, listening, and preparing. A father's love isn't just about providing. It's about protecting with a ferocity that defies death itself. Evil may scream for attention, wear expensive suits, and manipulate the truth, but it always forgets one thing. The truth has no expiration date. When you hurt a child, you don't just break a bone, you wake a sleeping lion. And lions, they don't roar until they strike. This story is dedicated to anyone who is fighting a battle in silence. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and help is closer than you know. If Silas's story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more stories of justice to light. And tell me in the comments, who is the Silas in your life? Who is the person who stood up for you when no one else would? I read every single comment. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.